you don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the third part of What If Deku Joins Pokemonverse. Smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. The Namu roared and immediately broke free from its icy chains. It dashed toward the heroes and Pokemon on all fours like an animal. Todoroki, restrain the Namu again, Izuku exclaimed. Todoroki said nothing but complied as he tapped his foot on the ground and ice shot towards the closing in on the creature. The ice appeared in seconds and enveloped the monster, holding it back once more. Only this time, it covered its entire lower torso, leaving its arms free. The Namu went to smash the ice on its legs, but Bakugou had blasted himself to the monster with Kirishima in tow, and the two of them blasted and hit the creature straight in its face, stunning and preventing it from breaking free again. Your turn, purple fucker, Bakugou shouted. Gar shot his arm out while shouting, Gyarados, Hyper Beam, Tojkas, Air Slash, Mimikyu, Dark Pulse, Dragapult, Dragon Darts, Rotom, Leaf Storm. All the Pokemon present let loose their attack altogether, culminating in a spiraling beam of destruction. The beam soared through the air and exploded upon impacting the trapped monster. A huge shockwave pushed everyone back, and a dust cloud settled over the whole area, as the teens and Pokemon all looked on in suspense. After a few moments of silence, Todoroki finally asked, "Is it over?" Gar narrowed his eyes at the dust cloud while saying, "I don't think so." His thoughts were confirmed to be correct when the monster burst through the clouds and jumped straight towards the group. Gar froze in shock as Izuku and Todoroki grabbed and then moved him out of the way. Tojkas flew off, and Dragapult vanished into the ground. The Namu landed directly on top of Rotom and crushed the Pokemon into scrap. Luckily, the Pokemon jumped out of the machine before getting destroyed and then possessed a washing machine. The Namu jumped from the now broken lawnmower and jumped straight towards Gyarados, who received a devastating blow to the face. The giant fish fell with a crash, and the Namu used the blow as a counterforce to land right in front of Izuku, Todoroki, and Gar. The Namu roared and prepared to throw a punch straight at them until Gar gave a last-minute command. Wood Hammer. Mimikyu jumped in front of the Namu, and using its wooden tail, it slammed against the Namu's stomach, which immediately absorbed and bounced off the attack like rubber. That's new, Gar commented in dread. The Namu was about to land the blow when a stream of water from Wash Rotom hit against its side and pushed it away. Since they had a moment to space for a breath, Todoroki looked at Gar and asked, "That's new. It's fast, strong, durable, can heal like Lance's Dragonite, and now can absorb physical attacks." "Yes, that's new," he shouted at him. "Then how do we beat it?" Todoroki asked again. "Wail on it till it can't take any more," Bakugou shouts while joining the group. "I'm gonna have to go with you on this one," Gar said to Bakugou. "Or we can use any physical attack on its face and head," Izuku put forth. "You know that also might work." Gar agreed. At this time, the Namu got back up from the ground and turned back to the teens, trying to attack again. But this time, Gar was ready for the monster. "Hydro Pump," he shouted as both Wash Rotom and Gyarados, who recovered from the blow, both shot the Namu on both sides with powerful jets of water, pinning it down. Before the Namu could recover, Gyarados sprung into action and tackled the Namu. He then wrapped his body around the monster and began to tighten. "Thunder," Gar commanded as Gyarados generated electricity from his crest and shot a bolt directly on the creature. However, the Namu seems only mildly affected by the attack, and after the electricity subsided, it broke free from the Pokemon's coils and gave it another punch to the face. The Namu then grabbed the downed fish by his tail and began to puny god him all over the place. It was even using his body like a flail to smash Wash Rotom, who zipped out of the machine again and slapped away both Izuku, Bakugou, and Kirishima, who tried to attack and free Gyarados from its grip. "Gyarados, return," Gar yelled while returning the Pokemon safely. Rotom then possesses the fridge and becomes Frost Rotom. "You seem a little washed up after that. Buzzed, how about you take a moment to chill out?" Rotom said while opening his doors. "Blizzard," Gar commanded as a strong gale of fridge wind and snow emanated from Rotom's insides. The water on Namu's body immediately began to freeze, and in seconds the monster became a life-sized ice statue. "Seems he got freezer burn on that deal." Buzzed, Rotom jokes. Everyone sighs or facepalms at his pun, only leaving Gar to chuckle at the terrible joke. Gar then told them they should take the chance to stop the Namu permanently before it broke free. The teens agreed to this as Bakugou and Izuku hopped on Togekiss' back and used his flight speed to propel themselves quicker and harder. However, the Namu didn't stay trapped for long as it broke free when the two teens launched themselves off the Pokemon's back. The Namu made a quick motion and backhanded both teens straight off their flying course. Namu then jumped towards the nearest target and grabbed Togekiss around his neck. Togekiss struggled to break free, chirping and squeaking in pain. But the Namu only silenced the bird when it choked the Pokemon silent. Togekiss, Gar cried out while whipping out its Pokeball. Suddenly Rotom came up behind the Namu and somehow managed to trap the creature into its body. No, you and I aren't finished just yet, buzzed, Rotom stated while somehow pulling the monster into his body with only his arm holding Togekiss showing. Rotom then slammed the door right between the Namu's arms and made the creature let go of Togekiss, who flew away to a safe distance. Rotom's body jiggled and bounced around as the Namu tried to break free, but Rotom held on tight and wouldn't let up. Buzzed, since you're okay with the cold, let's see how you handle the temperature in the negatives. Negative Kelvin, that is. Buzzed, Rotom stated as he turned his internal temperature down drastically. Frost began to condense around every part of the Pokemon, nearly turning him into a piece of furniture that was left on in a snowstorm dramatically. The cold was so bad that the immediate area dropped several degrees, and even Rotom was starting to show signs of cold lethargy. Then Rotom's body began to shake again, only more violently. Even Namu's trapped arm began to wriggle about. Rotom began to panic as he exclaimed, "Buzzed, no, you're not supposed to be moving at all. You shouldn't even be conscious right now. Buzzed, you should be a popsicle." Then the Namu broke free and broke Rotom in the process, shattering him into little pieces all over the place. Rotom managed to leave the wreckage and then possessed his next item, a toaster oven, becoming Heat Rotom. Rotom bounced around as Namu crumpled to his knees and began to breathe out heavily and forcefully, with huge amounts of frost all over his body. Namu looked up to see Rotom bouncing towards him, and the creature stood up to try and attack again before he did. But the monster was quickly stopped with a comeback attack from Togekiss to the brain. Togekiss used Dazzling Gleam on the order of Gar and stunted the creature long enough for Rotom to get in attacking range. Buzzed, you know what they say, if you can't handle the heat, then get out of them. Rotom began to joke. Heat Wave. Gar cut off in command. Rotom then opened his open doors, and a burst of searing hot air hit the Namu, immediately melting the ice and burning its skin to a crisp. But this time, the Namu pushed through the attack and smashed Heat Rotom between both its hands. Rotom bolted out of the toaster oven and flew into the fan. Before he could possess it fully to attack as Fan Rotom, Namu grabbed it and then used the Pokemon as a weapon against Togekiss, smashing the machine to pieces over the bird's head. Rotom zipped out of the fan and flew around the monster's head, distracting him from the Togekiss long enough for him to recover. Togekiss shook the blow off and went to join Rotom in distracting the creature. Seeing they had a chance, Gar commanded, "Rotom, Confuse Ray." Togekiss, Thunder Wave. Rotom then produced 3 strange lights that encircled Namu's face, and Togekiss flew in close while releasing electricity from its wings. Before the Namu succumbed to its statues, it managed to slap Togekiss hard enough to down it for good. Gar used the Pokeball he'd already had out and returned the fainted Pokemon. "Nice job, Togekiss. You held out till the end and gave us a foot up. Take a good rest," Gar whispered to the Pokeball. Suddenly Rotom zipped away from Namu and flew over to Gar, where he went right back into his phone. Rotom floated out of Gar's pocket, and while breathing heavily, the Pokemon stressed. "That was too close. I've never had so many close calls in my whole life. And I'm not even alive." Rotom then looked at Gar and said, "Sorry I couldn't be much help to you, Garfield. I guess I'm not much of a battler. Hey, don't beat yourself up. After all, you did so much as it is. Take a rest for now." Gar comforted the Pokemon. "Gladly," Rotom agreed wholeheartedly while disappearing behind him. Gar looked back at the Namu and saw that it was quickly experiencing the symptoms of dual status effects. It appears disoriented and wobbly around on jelly legs while occasionally freezing up with electricity coursing through its body. Gar gave a confident smile, knowing they finally had fate in their direction. Tamura was not pleased with the results right now. Sure, his Namu took down several of the Pokemon and beat around a few of the students, but now it was acting like a drunk after getting hit by lightning. What the heck was wrong with it this time? "What did you do to my Namu?" he demanded. Gar gave a proud smile and answered, "Your thing has been subject to what I like to call dual status. Your pet is now confused and will attack itself and paralyze, making its movement limited." "What?" he shouted. "Namu, do as I say and kill them all." The Namu wobbled around a bit more and then punched itself in the jaw. The blow was so powerful that its lower jaw was nearly ripped clean off, only now hanging on by a thread. Tamura's jaw also dropped at seeing his creation just hurt itself for no reason. Gar snapped his finger with a smile and stated, "It hurt itself in its confusion. So now it's vulnerable." Kirishima asked, "Not really, but you can get a few good solid licks on it." Bakugou answered, "Confusion doesn't last for too long, and paralysis is a game of chance, so choose your cards wisely." Gar added. Dragapult came from out of the ground, behind the Namu, and slashed it to the side with its tail. Then Mimikyu came from the other end and slashed it across the chest with its claws. "Bidding out your time, as usual, Dragapult," Gar said to the Pokemon as it appeared next to him from the ground, soon joined by Mimikyu. Dragapult only gave a lazy cry in reply. Soon the rest of the teens joined in at Gar's side and faced off against the dazed monster. "So what's the plan?" Todoroki asked. Izuku thought for a moment while taking into everything they had right now. Then it came to him like a wave, and turning to the rest of his team, he explained, "Well, it can't beat it by normal means, so we'll have to break it apart. Gar will stun Namu, Todoroki will encase it, then me, Kaken, and Kirishima will attack it head-on." "Sounds good to me," Kirishima agreed while hardening his arms. "For once, you have an idea, I like Deku." Bakugou agreed while letting out a small explosion. Todoroki silently nodded. "Then I'll take the lead. Dragapult, Dragon Darts. Mimikyu, Dark Pulse." Gar commanded. Dragapult and Mimikyu launched their attacks directly at Nummo. They caused the creature to stop for a moment, helping even more when electricity for paralysis shocked the creature and made it spaz up. Todoroki then encased the Namu's whole body in ice, and lastly, Kirishima, Bakugou, and Izuku charged at the Namu from their spots and with their most powerful attacks ready. All at once, the teens hit the ice, and the Namu shattered into pieces, or so they thought. Once the ice shattered, Namu's body stayed fully intact. The creature fell to the floor for a minute and laid unmoving. The teens all watched the creature to make sure it had gone down, but it still didn't even move. Seeing this, Tamura began to ventilate heavily out of anger, wanting to fight the young heroes himself. Gar especially kept a close eye on the monster to make sure it was down. He knew how this thing works. It'll play dead till it heals up or gets an opportunity to attack. So Gar watched every part of the thing like a watchdog, trying even to pinpoint the slightest movement that it was still alive. Then he saw it. A single finger just twitches out of place. "Everyone, get away," Gar shouted. But it was already too late. Namu shot from the floor at the three teens trying to get away. Kirishima tried to defend the other two but was quickly broken when Namu punched him into the ground, and it made a crater. It then went after Bakugou, who tried to blast it, but it quickly grabbed both his arms, crushed them, and then punched him from its grip straight across the area like a baseball. Then it dashed in front of Izuku, and using its huge hand, it slapped Izuku against the ground like a bug. But Izuku's body bounced right up, and Namu punched the green teen right in a boulder when he slumped to the ground. "Tatsuki, Ijiro, Izuku," Gar cried in desperation. The Namu turned its attention to Gar and Todoroki. It then dashed to them with blinding speed. Todoroki managed to have enough reaction time to put up a giant ice wall, but it was for nothing in the end. The Namu smashed through the ice with ease, and the large chunks flew towards the two teens. Luckily, Dragapult had anticipated this and grabbed Mimikyu in his mouth, then flew behind Gar, where he scooped him onto his back. Just before the chunks could hit him, the dragon Pokemon flew into the air and out of range of the flying projectiles. However, Todoroki was not so lucky and ended up taking several ice chunks straight to head and body, knocking the teen straight out. "Shoto," Gar cried in desperation while reaching out for the unconscious teen. Dragapult flies up high and away from the creature before it can jump up and grab them. Gar sat on the Pokemon's back, bewildered and shocked at what he just saw unfold. He felt dead inside, like Necrozma had stolen all the light and warmth from his body, leaving him in a cold, dark, and unsure state of being. Then his emotion came back like a flood of surf, and he burst out in a mixture of frustration, disgust, anger, and sadness. He pounded his hands against Dragapult's head as he vented, "Damn it. Damn it. How could I let this happen? How? I'm so fucking useless. Useless. I'm supposed to be a champion, damn it. I'm supposed to do better for others." Tears streamed down his face in huge tracks as he vented, "This is all my fault. My fault. My fault." Gar finally stopped pounding the metallic head of Dragapult and broke down into uncontrollable sobbing. He cried so hard that it started to pool around the dragon's horns where the Dreepy sat. Mimikyu eventually made his way from the dragon's mouth and up to Gar. where he tried to console him with soothing back rubs. But nothing seemed to calm him down, not even when Dragapult had to make sudden maneuvers when the Namu tried to tackle them from the ground. However, Gar pulled out of his emotional state when he heard a very dry voice begin to laugh coldly. He peeked an eye out and saw Tamura laughing in full view of Namu's handiwork. Looking so delighted, it made him look even more insane than usual. The sadness in Gar melted away, and he felt a new emotion quickly rise in him. Anger. Gar ground his teeth so hard in anger it got to the point his gums began to bleed. He shot his head up and glared a hateful glaze at the hand villain, who felt his glare, and upon turning his head to meet his eyes, immediately froze up seeing the fire they held behind them. Gar then grabbed Dragapult's horns and commanded him to move for the villain. Although hesitant at first, Dragapult obeyed and flew straight for the frozen villain. Gar commanded the Pokemon to use dragon darts directly at him, and the Pokemon launched its Dreepy straight at the villain. But Kurogiri was next to him and opened a portal in front, making the Dreepy pass through into another part of the area. Gar shouted for Flamethrower, and the Pokemon shot hot flames from its mouth. Again Kurogiri used a portal to make the flames pass through and avoid them. But this time was different. As soon as Kurogiri dropped the portal, two Dreepy came out cloaked in smoke and charged straight for the two villains. Kurogiri didn't have enough time to put up another portal, and Tamura was still frozen. The two Dreepy hit their target and exploded, creating a large dust cloud. Once Gar waited for the dust to settle and once it was clear enough to see, his face dropped in shock as he saw the two Dreepy caught in the huge hands of the Namu. Gar commanded Dragapult to go up just as Namu threw away both Pokemon and tried to jump after him. Gar saw this and pulled a fast one as he did a perfect handstand on Dragapult's head just as the Namu phased straight through the Pokemon's body like air. Gar fell back on the Pokemon's back and took off before the creature reached the ground again. As they flew above the villains and the Namu, Gar gripped his fists hard enough to bleed in frustration until that frustration was replaced by sadness as tears formed and fell from his eyes again. He felt lost and scared. He didn't know what to do or how to do it. Who was gonna help him? Who was gonna guide him? Who was gonna stop this nightmare? What'll I do now? Nothing I throw at this thing hurts or keeps it down for long. Where's All Might when I need him? Gar exclaims, distraught. He then grounds his teeth and pulls the useless pokebox from one of his pouches. He vents to the object, if only this stupid thing would work. I could have pulled out some more pseudo-legendaries or even a single legendary. Hell, even an Ultra Beast could have. Gar stopped mid-thought as he trailed off, then continued. Ultra Beast ... that's it. He shouted in a eureka moment. Gar then reaches into one of his pouches and pulls out an unusual-looking Pokeball. It was a strange shade of space blue with a white spiderweb-like pattern going around it. Gar jiggled the ball in his hands and told Dragapult to keep Namu interested in them but also out of reach. Rotom, he shouted, and the phone popped out from behind him. What do you need? Buzzed, Rotom asked. I have an idea. Is it a crazy idea? Buzzed, yes, I already disagree with it. Buzzed, do you have anything better? Rotom looked around at their situation and replied, nope. Good, then let me explain. Gar then showed the Pokemon the two items he was holding. Your Pokebox and a Beast Ball. Buzzed, what are you gonna do with those? Buzzed, the machine Pokemon asked. Beast Balls can only capture Ultra Beasts, right? Gar resorted. Rotom looked at him weirdly and replied, Buzzed. Well yes. Ultra Beasts aren't like normal Pokemon. Their bodies are configured to work on entirely different frequencies for normal Pokeballs to capture. Buzzed, the Beast Ball configured itself to the dimension they're in and the Ultra Beast they're trying to capture, allowing capture to be used. Why? Buzzed, and Pokebox work on electro frequencies that store and transfer data for any Pokemon, right? Gar asked again. Buzzed, yes. Garfield, what are you? Rotom began to ask until he stopped mid-sentence and realized what he was getting at. Wait, Garfield. Buzzed, you're not saying that. He began to ask again until Gar cut him off. That's exactly what I'm saying, he exclaimed. Rotom looked amazed as he sputtered out, Buzzed. Garfield, you're a genius. Buzzed, you're gonna use the Beast Ball's inner workings to create a loop in the dimensional space difference to use the Pokebox. But how are you gonna get it to work? Buzzed, that's where you come in, he said while pointing to him and pulling wires from the Pokebox. What? Buzzed, Garfield, I know I'm amazing and all, but even I have limits. I don't think I can handle something of this magnitude. Buzzed, he exclaimed while making warning noises. I can only hook everything up together, but you have to make it work. He told the Pokemon calmly, even if I did, which I probably could, we're talking about interdimensional quantum physics theory. Buzzed, what happens when we try this and end up punching a hole in the space-time continuum? This world doesn't have a Dialga or Palkia to fix it. Buzzed. The entirety of reality could be shattered. Rotom stressed anxiously. Gar keeps working and connects wire to the open beast ball while replying. The world is too big for what ifs. Life is short, and right now, ours is about to become much shorter. So unless you have another idea, I'm all ears, pal. Rotom said nothing but looked around and browsed his chance of survival app. When nothing came up, he sighed in defeat and answered, "If we die, I just wanna let you know. I told you so." Buzzed. Noted. Now to your thing. Gar told the Pokemon. Rotom sucked in a determined breath and zipped from the phone to the Pokebox. Rotom's face and orange color appeared on the device, and he immediately got to work on connecting both device functions into one another. Once he was hooked in, he gave the okay, saying, "I'm connected and ready to go." Buzzed. Gar nodded, and pressing the power button, and said, "Engaging power." Suddenly a massive surge of power and light illuminated off of Rotom's body as he began to fizz out of control like a glitch. The light was so bright that it could be seen by the two villains below. "What the hell is that?" Tamura asked. Rotom still fizzed in and out as the inner workings of the two devices glowed and produced noise in an eerie and otherworldly manner, making Gar begin to worry. Rotom began to scream as he yelled out, "I quote am gonna puke." "I hope this works," Gar exclaimed while pressing the button to withdraw. Electricity and light burst forth from the inside of the glass container while blue energy pooled in and began to take strange shapes. A moment later, a huge burst of light blinded the teen and even halted Namu's constant assault. When the lights died down and Gar could see, he saw that the glass container of the Pokebox was filled to the brim with several different Pokeballs. Gar was stunned by this and initially couldn't even process it. When he finally came to, he laughed and stated, "Ha ha ha. It worked. It worked." His victory was cut short when he saw Namu flying towards him with a fist extended and screamed, "Oh Arceus." But Dragapult saw this long before the monster even jumped, and with one quick movement, he slapped Namu mid-air out of the sky with his ghostly tail. When the Namu fell and bounced off the ground like a ball, Gar sighed with relief and said to the dragon Pokemon, "Phew. Nice moves, Dragapult." Dragapult gave a lazy cry in return. Gar returned his attention to the Pokebox and saw it was normal looking again. He wondered if Rotom had simply left but stopped in shock when he saw the little Pokemon laying face first on Dragapult's head. "Oh my Arceus. Rotom," he shouted while scooping the Pokemon into his hands and pointing his face up. "Buddy, are you okay? Speak to me," he called to the seemingly fainted Pokemon frantically. Rotom made a small noise as if to talk, and Gar remembered that he couldn't speak outside of a device. So he plopped the Pokemon back into his phone and asked him to repeat it. Rotom opened his mouth and sang dizzily. Buzzed. "Mary had a little Mareep, little Mareep, little Mareep. Okay, back into the pocket with you," he said to the dazed phone while placing him safely into a pouch. "Twinkle twinkle, little Minor." Buzzed. He heard the Pokemon sing just before being muffled out. Gar turned his attention to the full Pokebox and examined every Pokeball in there. After a short bit, he grunted in aggravation while saying, "Darn. No beast balls. I sure hope I got some good ones." He opened one of the glass doors and pulled out an Ultra Ball. He jiggled the device in his hands, looked down at the Namu still trying to catch them, looked back at the balls, and said, "No time for one-on-one battles, time to send an army. Come on out, guys, and get ready to fight," he shouted while throwing out every single Pokeball in the container at once. The many Pokeballs flew through the air, opened up, and bathed the area in auras of blue light. From the Pokeballs came forth several different Pokemon including a Machamp, Rhydon, Tyranitar, Ambipom, Noivern, Victreebel, Phalanx, Ampharos, Espion, Sableye, Boltund, Houndoom, Weavile, Braviary, Persian, Unpheasant, Snorlax, Metagross, Aramstis, Mawile, Steelix, Typhlosion, Staraptor, Talonflame, Haxorus, Trevenant, Aegislash, Drapion, and best of all an Articuno. Gar looked on with bright eyes flooding with hope and excitement as he saw what Pokemon he managed to get. Oh, I got some good ones, alright," he exclaimed to himself excitedly. Tamura was in shock at what he just saw. First, the summoner was down to only 2 of his familiars and just barely kept away while bidding time. Then he did something he couldn't see, and now has a whole army of his familiars. What the crap is this? What the hell? Where does he keep getting them? Does he just have an army in his back pocket? He shouted angrily in shock. "You're damn right I do," Gar shouted toward the 2 villains. This made Tamura angry as he saw Gar have a look of smugness and assuredness spread across his face. Gar told Dragapult to fly lower and commanded his Pokemon to band around him, defensive style. He looked at the fuming hand villain and the far more wary mist villain and declared triumphantly, "I hope your Namu is as good as it's lived up thus far, cause now this is the final battle." The trainer and his Pokemon stood in a face-off against the two villains and their creation, neither side showing to back down. The Pokemon looked ready and determined, Namu looked dead, Tamura looked pissed and intrigued, and Gar looked ready for the final battle. Not a single sound was made, or movement was shown by either side, waiting for even one of them to slip up or show weakness. Then it happened. Both sides moved simultaneously and came face to face with each other in a charge of pounding feet and animalistic cries. The two sides closed in on one another in moments, and the real fight began. Pokemon went flying away from Namu's hits left and right. The Pokemon unleashed their attacks by the dozens with Gar on the front lines with them and giving commands the whole time. The Namu was beaten, burned, sliced, and other things as the Pokemon swarmed it like a hive of beedrill. Tyranitar, use Earthquake, Gar shouted, and the large dinosaur Pokemon hit the ground with its fists, causing a violent quaking under Namu's feet. Machamp, use Mach Punch, Gar commanded, and the human-looking Pokemon ran in with a fist glowing with energy as it punched the Namu square in the face. Rhydon, use Horn Drill, Gar followed up as the large upright dinosaur Rhino Pokemon charged forward with its single horn rotating. The horn pierced through Namu's skin and sank deep inside of its chest. The Namu roared in pain as Rhydon continued to push forward. Suddenly Namu grabbed the Pokemon, pulled its horn out from its chest, and then threw the creature straight into the air. The Pokemon landed on the ground with a mighty crash. Rhydon, are you okay? Gar called the animal. Rhydon let out a strange roar in response, and Gar clicked his tongue at the Namu. He had to think of a different approach. Brute force wouldn't do much, so he had to think smarter, not harder. Victreebel, use Acid, he commanded the giant living pitcher plant. The plant then sucked in some air and spat out huge globules of purple acid right on the monster. The Namu screams in pain again as the acid begins to melt away the skin, revealing its bones. That's when Gar knew he had a better chance. No, he just had to get it to stay still long enough for the second part to work. He looked at the Pokemon and commanded, Metagross, use Psychic. The large, metal, four-legged Pokemon's eyes began to glow with mystic power, and the Namu was lifted into the air. Gar then quickly followed up, saying, Typhlosion, use Explosion, and Talonflame, use Flame Burst. The large badger-like Pokemon with flames coming from the back of its neck turned around and blasted the hovering Namu with a plume of flames, while a large orange and black bird of prey shot a ball of fire from its beak that became the kanji for fire and blasted off towards the monster. The twin attack hit dead on in an explosion of fire. Smoke filled the area as the Pokemon and trainer waited for the results. A moment later a shape appeared from the smoke and charged right at the immediate Pokemon. Machamp managed to block the attack. Tyranitar tanked the attack like it was nothing. Metagross used its psychic powers to put up a shield. Typhlosion was sent a good way away from the attack. Talonflame flew high enough to dodge, but Victreebel had gotten hit so hard it flew clear across the area and right by Gar, where it passed out after slamming into a fallen tree. Victreebel, return, Gar shouted as the plant turned into energy and went back into its ball. When Gar turned back, he was horrified and shocked at what he saw emerge from the smoke. The Namu, half melted and charred up with a missing eye and many parts of its metallic skeleton exposed. Gar knew at that moment, whatever this thing was, it wasn't anything natural. Not like Mewtwo, or Genesect, or even Silvally. This thing was a real deal Frankenstein's monster. This means that there was no holding back. Not that he was anyway. He saw Typhlosion get up from the dirt with a painful yet pissed off expression, then saw Namu run straight toward the Pokemon to finish it off. Gar thought fast and commanded the Bear Mouse Pokemon, dodge and use Thunder Punch. Typhlosion quickly ducked under Namu's punch and generated electricity around its upper limb, where it threw a punch right up and into its jaw. The Namu took the attack as best as it could and just managed to grab the Bear Mouse's head. It then proceeds to smash its head into the ground repeatedly. Gar saw Typhlosion was already out of commission and returned the Pokemon to its ball. Typhlosion, return. Guess we'll have to try a different approach. Aromatisse, use Overpowering Scent. Gar commanded the large purply-pink perfume bottle bird. The strange bird creature then emitted a large cloud of pink vapor into the air around its body that spread all over. Talonflame, Staraptor, Articuno, Noivern, Braviary, Unpheasant, blow away the scent towards the Namu. He commanded the winged Pokemon. The flying Pokemon obeyed and flapped their wings hard enough to move the scent cloud barreling towards the monster. The cloud engulfed the beast, and its scent was so overpowering that the Namu dropped to its knees, hacking and coughing as its eyes watered. It blew so far that it reached the other two villains. Kurogiri dropped to his knees and tried to open a portal to alleviate the smoke, while Tamura was so severely affected by it that he promptly threw upright on the rocky ground. As the smell stunted the Namu, Gar quickly gave another command, saying, "Trevenant, use Nature's Curse." A large tree Pokemon with an angry expression on its bark and one red eye casket back in darkness stepped forward and unleashed a strange attack. Purple energy swirled around its body, then absorbed into its angry-looking mouth, where it shot out in the form of a wicked-looking ghoulish face that laughed while traveling toward the downed creature. The face hit the monster, and all the purple energy pooled right into its body. Suddenly, plants began to sprout from the ground and enraptured themselves around the Namu like chains. Even plants from around the area joined in the restraining. Ambipom, Mawile, Espion, use Swift. Gar commanded. The two-tailed, purple monkey with hands on the tails, a small humanoid creature with a mouth on the back of its head, and a purple cat-like creature with a red gem in its forehead and a tail that split off into two parts at the tip. All released huge amounts of star-shaped projectiles from their bodies. The stars flew through the air and crashed right into the Namu, creating a huge cloud. Tyranitar, Metagross, Rhyhorn, Haxorus, Snorlax use Hyper Beam. Gar immediately followed up as all four Pokemon released a massive beam of energy from their mouths. The beams flew toward the Namu and exploded, causing even more of a dust cloud to rise. Steelix, use Fissure. Gar commanded the large steel-coated snake creature. The snake then slammed its heavy tail onto the ground and opened a crack that the Namu fell in and became trapped. Now Crunch, he followed up, and the metal snake slithered forward only to slam its face straight into the crack with teeth bared. When it pulled its head up from the hole, the Namu was trapped halfway up its body in Steelix's teeth. Steelix bit down hard, but Namu's body only expanded like taffy or rubber. The Namu then used its freed arms to slam both onto the Pokemon's head, where the impact made the Pokemon let go of its prey. As soon as Namu touched the ground, Gar immediately commanded, exclaiming, "Use Iron Head." Steelix then charged at the monster, head first, and prepared to smash it. But the Namu punched it hard enough to halt its attack. Steelix fell from the sudden stop, and Gar dropped his mouth in a gasp. The Namu readied to attack again, but Gar quickly shouted, "Flash Cannon." Steelix then opens its mouth and shoots a beam of metallic-looking light directly at the monster. The beam continued in a steady stream for over several seconds before finally stopping. Once it did, the Namu was still standing in the same spot, albeit with extremely red skin. The creature then grabbed Steelix by its jaw and flipped it over its head, where it slammed the Pokemon on the ground with enough force to shake everyone in the facility. Gar whipped out the Pokeball and yelled, "Steelix, return." And the Pokemon turned into energy while in Namu's grasp. When the monster turned around to face the rest of the horde, a bunch of plants sprouted up from the ground once more and bound the Namu. Nature's curse was still in effect. Gar took advantage of this and commanded, "Mawile, Aramstis, Mimikyu, use Play Rough." Then, the three Pokemon dashed up to the trapped Namu and tackled it in a cartoon dust cloud with sound effects and objects thrown around. Before the dust settled, the Play Rough managed to knock loose the Namu's arms, allowing it to grab both Mawile and Aromatisse. The monster then slammed the two Pokemon together, which caused Aromatisse to faint, yet Mawile held on long enough to receive another command. "Crunch," Gar shouted as Mawile used its second mouth to bite down on the monster's face. But it was ineffective as the Namu simply slapped the Pokemon off, finally making it faint. "Mawile, Aromatisse, return," Gar shouted while returning both Pokemon. The Namu then set its eyes on Mimikyu, who was staring down the monster with glittering eyes. "Wood Hammer," Gar shouted, and the Pokemon jumped up and slammed the monster in its face with his tail. "Mimikyu, back to me," Gar commanded, and Mimikyu returned to the group of Pokemon. More vines and plants sported up once more and restrained the Namu in place. Gar shot out his arm and exclaimed, "Boltund, use Volt Tackle, Houndoom, use Mega Horn, Persian, use Slash." A yellow and black greyhound Pokemon then generated electricity around its body and charged straight at the Namu. Then the devilish-looking dog Pokemon charged at the Namu with its ram-like horns glowing. Lastly, the large Siamese-looking cat retracts its claws while running up to the Namu. The electric greyhound crashed right into its chest, sending electricity to course all around its body. The devilish dog Pokemon rammed into the Namu's ribs with its horns, and the large Siamese cat Pokemon jumped into the air and landed a huge slash mark across the Numo's neck and shoulder. However, all the attacks it took only caused the plants around its body to fall loose and free the Namu once more, to which it grabbed Houndoom by its horns and used it as a flail against Boltund and Persian. Persian just managed to get away, but Boltund wasn't so lucky and was sent flying. The Namu then tried to smash Persian with Houndoom's body, yet kept missing every time. Persian tried to retaliate using Power Gem, but Namu grabbed the Pokemon's face with its other hand and made the attack explode right in its face. Bound, Houndoom, Persian, return, Gar shouted while returning all Pokemon. As the Namu locked its eyes on Gar, it was unaware of something small approaching from behind. Its gemstone eyes glittered in Namu's own shadow as its teeth chattered with excitement. Before Namu could dash forward, Gar suddenly shouted, "Sableye, use Fury Swipes." Suddenly a small purple creature with gemstone eyes and other precious stones on its body burst from the shadows and began to swipe furiously at the Namu with small sharp claws, all while vines sprouted from the ground once more and bound the Namu. The Namu tried to grab the little goblin crawling all over him with only one arm still free, but Gar quickly gave another command, saying, "Shadow Claw." The little goblin's claws became engrossed in dark matter as it gave a single large cut across its face. Obsidian Fang. Gar followed up as darkness pooled into the Pokemon's sharp fangs, turning them black. The goblin then scurried around to its back, jumped up to its neck, and nearly swallowed its whole brain in its mouth while biting down. The Pokemon bit down hard and took off a huge chunk of its brain in one bite, only leaving both eyes a few scrap pieces left behind. The Namu tittered around but promptly fell onto its face in the ground with a large wet-sounding thump. Gar snapped his fingers and exclaimed, "Nice work, Sableye." The Pokemon spat out the brain and smiled at its trainer with sharp white teeth. However, Namu's body then rose again behind the small Pokemon. The Pokemon froze and slowly turned its head around, only to be met with a fist and buried into the earth. Namu looked back at the remaining Pokemon with its now healing brain. "Oh, come on," Gar shouted while returning Sableye. Gar also noticed that none of the plants were sprouting up and restraining the Namu, meaning nature's curse wore out. Seeing as this gave him a leg up, he decided to reinstate the ability. He looked to Trevenant and commanded, "Trevenant, use nature's curse again." The living tree ghost obeyed, but before it could project the attack, the Namu and its still healing brain dashed forward and slammed the tree with a body slam. Trevenant fell to the floor and passed out. Gar growled as he shouted in distress and aggravation, "Trevenant, return." Haxorus, Aegislash, Drapion, you're up, he called to the upright armored dinosaur dragon with two tusks that looked like axe blades, a living sword with ribbon arms and a shield, and a giant purple scorpion with a tail that matched its pincer arms. The three Pokemon advanced as the Namu's brain was near all the way regenerated. Drapion took the lead with Haxorus not too far behind, and Aegislash took the far rear. Gar then commanded, "Drapion, use cross poison." Drapion then generated poison onto its two pinchers and made an X motion with them, and it hit the Namu across its face and chest. Haxorus, use dragon breath, he shouted in command. Haxorus then sucked in air and breathed out a blast of concentrated multicolored energy right at the Namu, which spread around its whole body. Aegislash, use sacred sword, he commanded the living sword. The sword then unsheathed itself from its shield, grabbed its shield, and used the counterweight to fling itself across in a slashing arch with its glowing blade. The slash hit the Namu over its shoulder and caused part of its chest and one arm to be severed in one go. It seems like the Namu was done for, but yet again, the creature pulled another fast one as its brain had fully healed up. The Namu then used its one good arm to land 3 punches on each Pokemon. Haxorus was sent flying quite a ways away. Aegislash managed to protect itself from the attack by using Shadow Sneak on Gar's command, and Drapion managed to catch the fist in its pincers and tail. Drapion, use Cross Chop, Gar commanded as the Pokemon released its arms while still holding with its tail, and made another X motion across Namu's body. Haxorus got up from the ground and charged forward with new vigor. Gar saw this and shouted, "Haxorus, use Slash." Haxorus then whipped its head like a mace and slashed a chunk out of Namu's back in one go. At this time, Aegislash came up from the ground and used its blade to whack at the Namu with ghostly power. Drapion, Dark Pulse, Haxorus, Night Slash, Aegislash, use Sacred Sword. Gar quickly commanded all 3 Pokemon. Drapion grabbed Namu's body with its claws and blasted it in the face with Dark Pulse. Haxorus embodied its mouth blades with dark energy and slashed across its back, while Aegislash performed the same maneuver as before but hit its good side with its usable arm. A massive explosion occurred and sent all 3 Pokemon back. However, when Gar looked around, he only saw Haxorus had been pushed back by sheer force. He looked confused at this till his stomach dropped at the mere thought of it. And when the smoke dropped, he was right. The Namu's good arm was holding back Aegislash's blade mid-attack, while its new arm had been fully regrown and was now holding Drapion by its neck. The Namu then used the Sword Pokemon as a weapon against Drapion, slamming the Sword Pokemon's shield against the Scorpion Pokemon's head repeatedly. then turned around and used its strength and the shield to punch the Dragon Blade Pokemon. The Namu then took the sword, slammed it against the ground, pulled its arm back into the punch, and prepared to smash it against the ground. King's Shield, Gar quickly shouted. Aegislash then sheathed itself back in its shield and put up a barrier made of little hexagons that protected itself entirely from the attack. But Namu was persistent and kept punching the force field with strong blows. Eventually, the movie gave out on the tiring Pokemon, and the shield dropped, leaving Aegislash exposed. The Namu took the opportunity and, this time, stomped its foot onto the hilt of the Pokemon, finally causing it to faint. Drapion, Haxorus, Aegislash, return. Gar returned the downed Pokemon. Weavile, use Ice Beam. Gar immediately shouted as the upright weasel with a redhead crest shot a beam of ice at Namu. Said Namu dashed up to the weasel and stomped the small Pokemon into the ground, where Gar returned it immediately. Noivern, use Sonic Boom. Gar commanded the large dragon-like bat with boombox ears. The dragon bat then sent off a loud sound wave with devastating power at the creature. The sound was so intense that it shattered any nearby glass, broke apart any plants, and cracked boulders. The Namu covered its non-existent ears and wailed in pain as the screeching continued. Once it finally stopped, the monster took one of the broken boulders and lobbed it right at the Pokemon faster than it could react. The boulder smashed against the Pokemon and caused it to faint, and Gar returned it safely to a Pokeball. The Namu then grabbed more large boulders and began to throw them at the bird Pokemon flying overhead. Gar commanded the birds to dodge and keep on the run, to which all obeyed and managed to avoid every rock thrown at them. When Namu ran out of rocks to throw in the immediate vicinity, that's when Gar knew he had a chance to strike. Braviary, Staraptor, use Brave Bird, Unpheasant, Talonflame, use Air Slash. Gar commanded the birds. The giant eagle with red, white head feathers and the large starling bird with an emo haircut both flew up high and then dove down at the strange blue energy that enveloped their bodies. The birds flew down at the Namu and then rammed the creature with their bodies, while the large pheasant with a pink mask and the orange and black bird of prey flapped their wings so hard it created air currents made to be sharp as blades. However, the attack was ineffective, and the creature took the opportunity to grab one of the brave bird's recoil, and began to smash it against the ground hard enough for the rock to break loose. After it threw the eagle to the side, it took the rocks and threw them at the remaining Pokemon. Both Unpheasant and Talonflame went down while Staraptor dodged, and Articuno managed to grab one of the rocks with its long tail and threw it right back at the monster. Gar safely returned Unpheasant, Talonflame, and Braviary to their Pokeballs before the Namu could do more. Before the Namu could turn its full attention towards the other Pokemon and trainer, the creature's attention was taken by the little pattering of tiny footsteps charging in unison. The Namu turned its head and saw several creatures in yellow armor that looked like walking Roman soldier helmets with blue eyes and tiny shields at their sides. The leader had a large red chest showing his leadership. This Pokemon was Phalanx, and it was charging at Namu with a first impression attack. But the Namu was quick and placed its foot out in front of the leader. The group came to a crashing stop as the leader's crest got wedged between the monster's feet. The Namu then reached its foot back and kicked the Pokemon like a bowling ball, which caused the other members of its group to spread around like toppled pins. Gar quickly returned the valorized Pokemon safely. Now the Namu was entirely concentrated on Gar and dashed to him at its full speed. Gar panicked and told Dragapult to fly up quickly. Just before the monster could get a third of the way to where he was, Namu suddenly felt his whole body stop and float in the air. It looked around and saw the strange four-legged metal thing and the pink two-tailed gemstone cat with glowing eyes, producing their physic energy to stop the Namu mid-attack. The Namu then grabbed the stony ground and began to pull itself toward the two physic animals. The two Pokemon then used their mind powers to instead hold the Namu down with a crushing force. But the monster's stretchy body kept it from being affected by the intense meta weight on its body, and it continued to claw its way towards them. Espion and Metagross were now starting to show signs of strain as they sweated from trying to put even more pressure on the Namu to hold it back. But every time they did, the monster would just keep pulling itself forward, slowly getting closer and closer. Eventually, Gar took the initiative and gave another command to his Pokemon, Ambipom, use Double Hit. Then a medium-sized purple monkey with a big smile and two tails with hands at their ends jumped over to the crawling monster and slapped it in the face twice with its tail hands. The Namu stopped crawling from flinching, which allowed Metagross and Espion to let their psychic powers free to rest. Gar then followed up, exclaiming, Snorlax, use Giga Impact. Suddenly the large fat bear pillow Pokemon jumped up from the ground and ran towards the creature. A wind cone was produced around its body as its belly started to change to red color. Ambipom jumped from the ground and somehow managed to land on Snorlax's head. The Pokemon then body slammed it and sent the monster flying. Snorlax yawned as Gar and Ambipom cheered its success. However, the Namu came back with full force and closed the distance between the two in just a minute. More than enough time for Gar to come up with a quick strategy. Once the Namu was just a few yards away, Gar exclaimed, "Snorlax, use high horsepower." Snorlax then kicked Namu. Once it got close enough, then used its foot as leverage to hold its body up and then gave another kick right to the monster's jaw. This caused Snorlax to do a backflip and made Ambipom climb to its butt, ready to attack. Shadow Claw. Gar shouted as Ambipom hands became cloaked in darkness and turned into sharp claws. The monkey Pokemon then jumped from Snorlax and began to swipe at the monster's chest and face with both hands. Ambipom jumped away from the monster once the deed was done but quickly froze when it saw a large shadow cast right in front of it. Then Snorlax landed right on top of Ambipom, smushing the Pokemon flat. All thanks to the quick work of Namu, who grabbed Snorlax by its leg, midair, and then used its huge body to slam down on the two-tailed monkey. The Namu then slammed Snorlax a few more times before throwing it right at the two physic types on standby. Metagross managed to dodge, but Espion wasn't so lucky as it tried to put up a force field of protection. The Protect did keep it from receiving the blow, but the impact was so great it sent both Pokemon flying. Where Espion was pinched against a wall to the back and fainted with Snorlax. Ambipom, Snorlax, Espion, return. Gar shouted while returning the three Pokemon safely back. When the three Pokemon were disposed of, Namu tried to run back towards the older teen on the Ghost Dragon to fulfill his master's orders. It even managed to get by Metagross in one quick flash of dust. But another Pokemon was again stopped by blocking the path. It was medium-sized and appeared as a wool-less upright sheep with yellow skin and black markings with red gems on its head and the tip of its tail. The sheep jumped in the way and tried to block the monster by spreading their arms in a show of bravery. Namu grabbed the sheep in a bear hug and quickly started to squeeze it to death. Ampharos, use thunder, Gar commanded as the sheep generated a bolt of electricity from the red orb on its tail. The thunder hit the monster dead on and caused it to release the Pokemon. Gar took the opening and shouted, "Thunder Punch." The sheep reeled back its stubby arm and then punched it into Namu's abdomen, where electricity flowed from it, shocking the monster and causing its body to convulse. Gar quickly followed up, saying, "Now, Iron Tail." The Pokemon's tail glowed brightly as it turned to the color and texture of steel, then began to strike the creature over and over rapidly. At this point, Gar noticed something very interesting about Namu's anatomy. After the electricity has passed over its body, it immediately loses its elastic-like properties, making it just as soft as any other person. Gar saw this and decided to use it to its full potential. If he could keep heading it with electric-type moves, his Pokemon might be able to finish it off for good. Gar then commanded Ampharos to use a thunder attack, but before the Pokemon could shoot electricity from the orb on its tail, the monster quickly grabbed the orb and began to slam the sheep Pokemon against the ground repeatedly. Gar quickly changed gears and returned Ampharos to its ball. Gar's plan had gone up in flames before it began. Gar was starting to get worried now. He only had a few Pokemon left and everyone he sent so far, no matter the condition, number, strength, or strategy he used, they would fall like Zubat with a thunder shock. As of now, he only had Machamp, Rhydon, Tyranitar, Metagross, Articuno, Staraptor, Mimikyu, and Dragapult. So what was he to do now? Suddenly the Namu dashed forward again, but this time was stopped by Metagross, who held the creature back with its front legs. The two struggled against one another in a tug-of-war standoff, with both having equal strength and footing. But the Namu showed its superior strength again as it slowly started to push back even harder on Metagross, whose feet were beginning to become plowed into the ground, and signs of fatigue were showing on its metallic face. Gar knew that Metagross couldn't hold out forever, and he had to take action before the monster either came Metagross or took out several Pokemon he might also throw at it. It was at that time he knew he had to pull out all the stops no matter what. So he reached into one of his pouches and pulled out a small wristband with a small multicolored stone with a teardrop symbol on it. He slipped it over his wrist, and closing his eyes, he spoke to Metagross, telling him to connect. Metagross obliged and relaxed its body and mind. When the two were in perfect sync, Gar raised his arm in the air with eyes shot open and recited some kind of speech. "Keystone, react to my heart." What in the world is he doing this time? Tamura asked. Desperation perhaps, Kurogiri thought aloud. Then white beams of energy flowed from the stone and into Metagross, making its body illuminate. Send life energy forth and connect us as one. Unearth the power laid dormant inside and bring it to the surface for a greater transformation. beyond power, beyond will, beyond evolution, Mega Evolve. The white beams then encircled the Pokemon in a vast sphere that appeared to harden, then crack until it burst open in a display of light, revealing a much different looking Metagross. Metagross now had 8 legs, 4 huge ones in the front, and 4 smaller ones in the back. It also had a much larger jaw, chin spike, and rounded head. Metagross was now floating in midair but not moving an inch, as the Namu was now the one straining to move the metallic creature even an inch. Now it was Metagross's turn to push back with its 4 front legs as it began to levitate its body against Namu's strength and make it move with relative ease. Now the Namu was the one struggling to hold Metagross back on its own feet as it was getting plowed into the ground. Tamura looked on in shock, not because his Namu was getting overpowered, but because of what he saw Metagross just do. No way. It had changed forms. Tamura mouthed silently in shock. Then Metagross pulled away from one of its massive arms and hit it against the monster, sending it flying across the area and past Tamura, where it slammed into a boulder. And it got stronger. Tamura said a little louder. "That's right, Tamura," Gar stated while getting the villain's attention back to him. "That's called Mega Evolution. Not only does Pokemon's appearance change, but so do its stats, making them even stronger. And right now, Metagross is one hell of a tank that can move fast, hit hard, and take damage. Now that thing is just like my Namu," Tamura muttered under his breath angrily. The Namu pulled itself out of the boulder hole, and before it could pull itself out, Gar commanded his Pokemon, "Metagross, use Meteor Mash." Metagross then zoomed up to the Namu and whacked it with a strike of 2 of its front arms, making the monster suck back in the boulder again. "Hyper Beam," Gar shouted as Metagross shot the pale yellow energy attack from its mouth directly at the monster and sent it through the boulder. Steam wafted off the monster's body as everyone waited to see if that did the job. But no, it wasn't. The Nomus arm shot up and tried to grab the Pokemon, who, with its supercomputer-like brain, easily predicted this and easily moved out of the way and back to Gar. The Namu pulled itself up from the ground, and, taking the broken boulders in its huge hands, it began to throw them in rapid succession at Metagross and the other Pokemon. However, the attack was stopped immediately as Gar commanded Metagross, "Use Physic to stop the rocks." Metagross obeyed and used its mind powers to stop all the boulders mid-flight. The stones fell to the ground, and Gar got an idea. He then turned to his remaining Pokemon and commanded, "Tyranitar, break apart the boulders around us. Machamp, Rhyhorn, fling all the boulders back at the Namu. Metagross, help them out with Psychic." The Pokemon did as they were told and started to break apart and throw dozens of rocks at the monster, which pelted and peppered it like a cartoon character. The onslaught of rocks continued until there was no more to grab or break apart from boulders. The Namu now looked far worse for wear as it now had several huge indents in its body, all of which were slowly healing. Gar thought this to be weird since its body only lost its elastic-like properties when exposed to electricity. Then it dawned on him, also due to his mental connection to Metagross. Its body was like rubber. The more or longer you stretch it without rest, it'll break or lose its elastic properties. He'd just have to attack it harder and faster than its body could heal the damage and keep its rubber-likeness consistent. He finally had a chance, and now he was going to go all out with it. "Metagross, use Psychic again," Gar commanded as the Mega Evolved Pokemon used its mind powers to lift the healing creature up and then crush it with said powers. When the monster fell, Tamura gave it a new command, demanding, "Alright Namu, new plan. Kill that metal thing first, then kill the brat and his other pets after." The Namu obeyed and dashed towards Metagross with top speeds. Metagross's supercomputer mind went through several calculations, and once the Namu was in the range of its plan, it used its levitation to spin out of the charging attack swiftly. The Namu came to a screeching halt and turned around to attack again. "Metagross, kite that thing away," Gar commanded, and Metagross obeyed. The Pokemon then tucked its legs like a torpedo and zoomed off into the distance with the monster not too far behind. Metagross swiveled and swirled through tons of obstacles to shake the Namu, but the monster only leaped over, smashed through, or turned on a dime through every environment block. The two creatures only picked up speed with each passing second and started to zigzag and encircle the huge facility at speeds the eye couldn't see. Though Gar could see everything that was happening thanks to Metagross's mind connection to him. Gar was the one giving mental commands to his Pokemon and telling it to lead the Namu astray for long enough. If this thing is made of flesh, then it just had to have a stamina limit. Gar just had to bring it to its end. The chase continued for several minutes, with Metagross using its supermind and Gar's commands to keep Namu at a safe distance and keeping it following him to exhaustion. At this point, the Namu was showing obvious signs of fatigue, as it breathed heavily and drooled like a dog. Gar knew this was his time to strike and mentally called Metagross to lead the monster back. Once the two had burst through a tree line, Gar immediately told Metagross to stop and face Namu with a meteor mash. Metagross obeyed and stopped on the spot while spinning around with two of its front legs ready to attack. But the Namu was quick, and once the Pokemon threw the punch, it grabbed both arms in his muscular hands, stopping the attack with ease. Gar smiled at this, hoping the Namu would catch the attack, then exclaimed, "Use Hyper Beam." Metagross unleashed the energy attack right at the Namu and sent it back. Gar then followed up, saying, "Now Giga Impact." Metagross tucked in its limbs and zoomed to the Namu like a rocket, creating a winding cone in the process. The Pokemon slammed right into the monster and kept on going, even after the tackle. Metagross kept zooming forward with the Namu trapped in its four front limbs while the Namu waved and wiggled helplessly like a flag in the wind. Metagross kept going and didn't lose speed as it sailed and crashed straight through the whole facility, and everything in it, no matter what it was. Metagross kept going until it came to the cliff face of the in-ground facility. But Metagross just kept going, shifting its gears and flying up the face of the cliff, then up the dome where it kept charging until it was on the ceiling, and still charging fast. Metagross kept going until it was over the spot where Gar, the other Pokemon, and the two villains were still standing and dropped straight down. The fall created more momentum and made them both fall faster until Metagross threw the Namu directly to the ground, where it bounced off like a ball. Gar then quickly shouted, "Giga Impact," again. Metagross tucked its limbs in again, and while still falling, it zoomed down right at the Namu at top speed. It rammed into the Namu between the ground and created a massive explosion of dirt and stone all over. The blast was so great that Kirigiri had to put up a portal, and Dragapult had to blast any rock chunks away with dragon darts. When the dust cloud was still at its peak, Metagross emerged from it completely unscathed, but no Namu in sight. Not wanting to wait around for the inevitable to happen, Gar told his remaining bird Pokemon to blow away the dusts. They did and revealed the Namu pinched in the ground like a seed on dried out soil. The Namu grabbed the sides of the dirt and began to pull itself out slowly from the impact. As Gar predicted, Namu's body had a huge indent in it that was slowly healing, very, very slowly. Even if the thing wasn't natural, it still had natural limits. Everything was connected in one form or another. The amount of stamina it had meant how fast it could heal. Hit it hard enough, and the blow won't be absorbed or bounced off. All Gar had to do was keep it exhausted and keep hitting it hard. While this was happening, Tamura was getting increasingly anxious. Gar was finding out Namu's limitations and weaknesses long before it could kill him, which was its original intent. If the Namu failed to take out the kids' pets before it could kill All Might, they'd have to start from square one again. And Tamura didn't want that. Namu was doing fine as it picked off the Pokemon one by one. But now, one went through some kind of power-up hack and was screaming his Namu left and right. Tamura then felt a light tap on his shoulder, which made his skin flinch, and he turned around to hear Kirigiri offer an idea. "If I may, my young lord, I believe it's time we intervene." Tamura smiled under the hand on his face and nodded in agreement. Kirigiri then opened a portal over Mega Metagross and, like last time, dumped a stream of water equivalent to waterfall on the Pokemon's head. However, when the water stopped, they both were shocked to see a perfectly fine Mega Pokemon standing in place, dripping wet, and with a displeased expression on its face as it stared them down. Before anyone could do any other movement or talk, Metagross used its mind powers to break a chunk of Kirigiri's neck brace right off. The Mist Man fell to the ground and clutched at his neck while coughing and gasping for air. "Did you think that would work a second time?" Gar stated. Metagross is part steel type, and steel types aren't weak to water attacks, they are ineffective. You can douse a flame, but you can't break metal with water. Tamura looked between his escape door on the floor, his weakening monster, and the Pokemon staring him down. He had to think of something quickly before he shared Kirigiri's fate. He tried to step back but nearly tripped over something. He looked down and saw that it was a buried power line. This gave Tamura an idea. He looked over at the slowly rising Namu and commanded, "Namu, pull up one of the power lines and use it against that metal thing." The Namu obeyed and moved faster than the blink of an eye as it pulled itself from the ground and ripped out a power line straight from the hole it was in. The monster then jumped towards Metagross and, breaking the cable apart, it touched the wires to the Pokemon's wet body. The Pokemon's body illuminated like a light bulb from the electricity coursing around its body and cooking the water to the point of boiling. Eventually, the flow of electricity stopped, and Metagross had several electrical burns all over its metal coat. Metagross stopped levitating and fell to the ground with swirls in its eyes. The Mega Pokemon glowed again and returned to its previous natural form. Gar gasped, Tamura smiled, and Namu roared in victory. Metagross, return. Gar called out while returning the fainted Pokemon. Now Gar only had 6 Pokemon left, and he didn't know if they could beat this thing now. He used up his 1 Mega Evolution chance and would have to wait with time he didn't have. But Gar tightened his fist and knew he wouldn't back down now. He could give up. So long as he had even a single Pokemon, he had a fighting chance. Tyranitar, use Dragon Tail. Rhydon, use Iron Tail. Gar commanded. The 2 giant Pokemon then ran over to the Namu and took a swipe at it with their tails. Rhydon's tail became a steel-like surface and Tyranitar's glowing green with a scale-like layer. The 2 Pokemon flung their tails at the monster, and Namu caught both Pokemon in each hand. Just as Gar predicted. Staraptor, use Steel Wing. Gar commanded the emo bird as its wing became a steel-like surface and slammed both into the creature's exposed brain. The Nummo flinched and dropped its grip over Rhydon and Tyranitar's tails. Machamp, use Close Combat. Gar shouted as the 4-armed humanoid creature ran forward and began to throw punches at an unnatural speed. The hits were so fast and precise that no one could even see the Pokemon's hands as they flew forward on Namu's face, only the movement of its body, and the after effect of Namu taking each blow. The whole screen looked like a one-sided anime fight as Namu's body took the effect of anime physics from each unnatural punch. When the assault ended, Machamp grabbed the Namu under its arms and began to squeeze it tightly. Gar then shot his hand out and exclaimed, Rhydon, Tyranitar, throw Machamp and Namu into the air. The 2 Pokemon did as they were told, and with their combined strength, they easily threw both Pokemon and monster clear into the air. Once they reached the climax of their ascent, Machamp arched its body, and then started to spin like a pinwheel while descending at a much faster rate. The spinning continued as everyone watched in awe and amazement. While in the spin cycle, Machamp didn't look dizzy or sick, while Namu looked ready to throw up as it waved around like a limp noodle. Once the 2 of them were near the ground, Gar quickly commanded, Machamp, use Seismic Toss. The moment they were just a few yards off the ground, Machamp used the moment to throw the Namu off its shoulders fully and right against the ground where it left a huge crater. The throw to impact was so powerful that it made Tamura and Kurogiri bounce in place. Before Machamp could fully reach the ground from the attack, Gar shouted to the Pokemon, Machamp, Tyranitar, Rhydon, triple attack. Rhydon came from the right, Tyranitar came from the left, and Machamp came from above as all 3 of them sent their fists right into Namu's squishy body and head. The triple strike was so powerful that it caused a small shockwave to roll over the whole field. But it didn't end there, as Namu was pinned down in the dirt. The 3 Pokemon continued to beat into the monster with their full force. The Namu still stayed pinned and didn't move an inch to fight back. Tamura did not like this at all. So with all his anger boiling in him, he shouted at the monster, Namu, I command you to get up and kill those animals. With that command, the Namu was filled with new vigor as it tucked in its limbs and then shot up while redirecting the blows from the Pokemon right at them with its body. Tyranitar slid back, as did Rhydon, but Machamp was sent back flying in a good way. Gar acted quickly and exclaimed, Rhyhorn, use superpower. The giant rhino Pokemon dug its feet into the earth, charged forward with its whole body, and cashed straight into the Namu. But the Namu recovered quickly and grabbed the Pokemon by its horn, and before Rhydon could retaliate with a horn drill, the Namu flung the Pokemon clear across the area, straight into the air where it crashed against the glass dome above. The Pokemon fell to the earth below, but before it could crash down, Gar quickly returned the Pokemon safely to its Pokeball. Staraptor, use Close Combat. Gar cried out. The emo bird flew behind the monster and began to attack it with its wings, beak, and talons. The Namu swiveled around and fought against the bird, matching their speeds and striking force. The fight went on until it looked like Nummo was starting to gain the upper hand. So Gar switched gears and commanded, use Steel Wing. Staraptor broke off the fisticuff fight and turned its wings into a steel-like surface, ready to slam the Namu with them. But the Namu was quick and grabbed the bird's wings before it could strike. The Namu then used its other hand to punch the bird and sent it flying away. Gar gasped at seeing the bird getting hit but went calm as he saw Staraptor pick itself up, shake itself down, and then fly back into the air. Gar had to try something else. Hitting hard and fast can only do so much, and now he was down to just 5 Pokemon. Before he could continue to think, Namu made a beeline for him, and Gar had to react fast enough for him and Dragapult to escape. Gar did another handstand on Dragapult's head and told the Pokemon to rise as quickly as it could. As it did, the Namu launched itself from the ground and tried to grab the Ghost Dragon. But like last time, it only phased straight through. Gar clicked his tongue in aggregation. Now the Namu wasn't even looking at the Pokemon like a priority threat. Now it was trying to go after him. He had to think of something. Anything. He needed to be stronger. He needed to be bigger. He needed to be. Buzzed. Did someone call for music? Buzzed. Rotom broke Gar's panicked train of thought while playing some music. Gar pinched the bridge of his nose and stated, "Rotom, get back in my pocket. You're still not well. And turn off that music, it." Gar stopped mid-sentence as he took a moment to hear the music Rotom was playing. Pokemon Sword and Shield, Gym Leader Battle. Gar's face dropped in shock as something came across his mind. Turning to the Pokemon, he quickly followed up his previous sentence saying, "Just gave me an idea. Thanks, Rotom, you're the best. And it helps with the ambience. 2 scoops please." Buzzed. Rotom blabbered out as Gar shoved him into his pocket. Gar then switched the Mega Bracelet to another kind of wristband with red and blue edges, a red stone in the center shaped like an X, and a black underside piece shaped like a hurricane. He wore the white band with the stone facing on the top and the black piece under his wrist. He then took out one of the Pokeballs and commanded Dragapult to get close to the other Pokemon. The dragon flew towards the remaining Pokemon, pointing the ball at the group. He shouted, "Machamp, are you ready to end this?" The Pokemon had just gotten up from the ground, looked up, saw its Pokeball and what Gar was wearing. The Pokemon cried while standing up and flexing its muscles. Gar smiled at this and returned Machamp to its Pokeball. "What is he doing now?" Tamura huffed while scratching his neck. "Something that's not good for us." Kurogiri stood at Tamura's defense. Gar then told Dragapult to fly up high. As they ascended, the band around Gar's arm began to glow with red energy. The energy pooled out of the band and into the Pokeball. Then the round device expanded to over twice its size and glowed different shades of bright to dark red. Gar then threw the huge ball into the air with both hands, and when it popped open, out came Machamp covered in darkness. Suddenly the Pokemon began to expand and grow within the first moment of leaving the ball. Machamp kept growing until it was nearly touching the top of the dome. It stopped growing, and its feet crashed against the ground, causing the whole area to vibrate. Machamp tucked its arms in, then flexed them outwards while giving off a much louder and deeper cry as red misty energy swirled around its body like a twister. Now Machamp looked far different than before. It had 3 swirling red clouds around its waist. Its belt became more detailed. Its black markings appeared as leggings instead of a speedo. Its head became smaller, the 3 crests were closer together, its eyes were yellow, and its forearms were even more muscular and had yellow-orange markings like they were on fire. The 2 villains looked on in utter shock at what they were seeing in front of them. For the first time in their lives, the 2 of them knew exactly how it felt to be an ant near a human, and it was terrifying. They gawked with mouths wide open, completely unable to even produce any viable words while the giant Pokemon stared down at them. "What the hell?" Tamura finally managed to scream out. "How in the—" Kurogiri cut off his sentence mid-thought. "Gentlemen," Dar announced to the villains, "a power hailing from my dimension. I give you Dynamaxing with Gigantamax Machamp." He exclaimed like an announcer as the music took a drastic dip with the sounds of a cheering crowd. "Now it's giant. How the hell are we gonna kill that?" Tamura screamed in frustration and anger. "You're not," Gar answered as Dragapult flew near Machamp's side, towards its torso. Gar then threw out his arm and shouted, "Okay, Machamp, let's finish him off good. Use Max Knuckle." Machamp then pulled its massive arms back and made several striking movements that did nothing. Tamura looked confused at this until he looked up and saw several huge fists, each one the size of a small building, rain down and crash right onto the Namu with a huge explosion. Once the dust settles, the Namu pulls itself from the creator, albeit with more than a few bruises, bleeding injuries, and new indents in its body showing its metal skeleton had broken in some places. Gar snapped his fingers in irritation, seeing as his one-shot attack plan failed. But even so, Max Knuckle still did a decent amount of hurt on the monster. 2 more, which was the limit, should do the trick. Again Gar commanded, "Max Knuckle again. Don't just stand there and take the attack. Move, you dumb monster." Tamura shouted at Namu. When the rainfall of fists fell from the sky again, the Namu didn't stand around like a sitting ducklet and dodged the attacks one by one with amazing speed. It didn't stop moving till the onslaught was over. This made Gar flash an expression of worry. If they couldn't land this next move, Machamp would return to its previous form, and they wouldn't have another shot like this. The Namu was already starting to heal away the damage, and if they couldn't keep up the heat, then they'd have to start all over again. And now that it was on dodge command, hitting it would be problematic if it could sit still long enough. Gar circles around the battle site, trying to think of a fast strategy to halt the Namu. He'd have to sacrifice one of his Pokemon to stun it, but that also meant getting in the line of fire. So what was he to do? As he circled, trying to think of his next move, his thoughts were interrupted by a bird Pokemon cry. He looked to his side and saw Staraptor flying close by him and Dragapult. The bird Pokemon was chirping up a storm and motioning over to Namu. Gar immediately knew what the Pokemon was trying to say and refused, stating, "No Staraptor, you're too hurt to attack with another brave bird. You need to heal up with Roost." Staraptor only stared back at Gar with a fiery, determined look in its sharp eyes. Pokemon and trainer looked at one another for several long moments as if communicating with their intense glares. Gar immediately knew what Staraptor was trying to say to him and his expression fell calm and understanding. None of his current Pokemon could hit the Namu hard enough to stun it and get out of the way in time for Machamp to attack. Staraptor was the only chance. Even if he did heal up with Roost, attack, and still have enough HP after, he couldn't get out of the way quick enough. He'd have to take one for the team. And Gar could see the bird Pokemon was ready to do so. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" he asked the bird. Staraptor gave a loud cry in an answer as Gar sighed in defeat. He closed his eyes, and in a low tone, he said, "You always were my wild card back in Sinnoh." He then shot his eyes open and exclaimed, "All right, let's do this." Before he could, he needed to think of a way to hit the Namu even harder once it was stunning. Sure, Max Knuckle was strong as hell, but he missed the last attack and was hoping to hit the monster all 3 times. Now he wanted to hit it with the power and strength of 2 Max Knuckles simultaneously. But what could he possibly do to achieve that? Just as he was thinking, Rotom came out of his pocket again, and as the music played from him, he began to sing a completely different song. "Buzzed, row 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 your gogoat, up and down the stream," he sang in a babble. Gar pinched the bridge of his nose and said back to the phone, "That isn't even the song you're playing, Rotom. And it's boat, not go. Goat." Gar trailed off while looking to the side and catching sight of the large half-sunken ship in the flood zone. "That's it," he said in a low tone. He then turned to Machamp and exclaimed, "Machamp, grab that boat in the lake." Machamp nodded and stomped its way towards the flood zone, clearing several thousands of yards in just seconds. Gar then turned to Staraptor and commanded, "Staraptor, use Brave Bird." Staraptor gave a loud cry and rose into the air before skyrocketing down at top speed while blue energy emanated from its body until it turned red the faster it went. The bird aimed straight for Namu, who was entirely focused on dodging Machamp's attacks, and before Tamura could commend it for evading Staraptor, the bird crashed right into the creature's head. It hit the Namu so hard that its neck bent in a weird position and made an audible crack noise, meaning its neck broke. Staraptor fell to the floor, fainted with swirls in its eyes from the recoil. The monster fell on the ground with a thud while landing on its already awkward neck. Gar returned the bird Pokemon safely to its Pokeball before setting the second part of his plan in action. "Nice job, buddy. You are my special ace. Get some rest. You deserve it," he spoke to the ball. While this was happening, Machamp had picked up the large ship from the water and carried it back to the central area in only 2 of its 4 arms. The Pokemon then held the ship over its head, making a gesture of throwing it down. The villains looked shocked by this action and stood frozen between the giant Pokemon and the giant ship over their heads. Tamura, whose expression is between anger and panic, pointed an accusing finger while yelling at Gar with a shaky voice and clicking knees, "YUW wouldn't dare." Gar closed his eyes while holding his hand to his left breast and replied in a soft yet low tone, "You hurt me, you hurt Shota, you hurt my friends, and you hurt my Pokemon." His eyes then shot open with anger as he screamed, "I will never forgive you." Gar snapped his finger, and Machamp began to throw the boat down on them. "Max 1,000-pound drop," Gar shouted. Machamp roars and throws down the ship with all its might. The boat soared down to the ground like a dropped weight as the Namu started to get up as its broken neck began to heal, and the villains stood in disbelief of the sight. Tamura was the only one to act and scream in terror, "KUROGIRI." The Mist Man snapped out of his trance and grabbed the Hand Man while warping away in a quick portal. The ship crashed to the earth just as the 2 villains vanished and landed with a large metallic boom. A dust cloud and shockwave created was so big that it nearly tipped over Tyranitar, almost sent Gar off Dragapult, and almost knocked Articuno out of the air. The shock was so strong that it made the entire facility shake, nearly causing the glass dome to break. When the shaking stopped and the dust finally settled, the villain duo reappeared once more near the extremely damaged ship with flabbergasted expressions anyone could ever make. The other Pokemon shook off the dust covering their bodies while Gar climbed back on top of Dragapult after just barely grabbing hold of his tail after nearly falling off. Machamp roared once more in victory and immediately glowed while shrinking back down in seconds. Machamp now looked as it did before but now had an air of extreme exhaustion on its body and face. Gar looked on at the wrecked ship in front of them and waited for the results of his plan. He hoped that this would be the one thing that would put an end to the nearly unstoppable monster. If that was the case, he could still use his remaining Pokemon to take the villains down with relative ease. Unfortunately, fate had other plans in mind, and after a few seconds, a very loud crashing and clunking noise could be heard from the ship's inside. After a few more seconds, the ship's keel was busted open by a large black fist. Gar squealed at this sudden sight as the Namu pulled the keel open like tin foil, then pulled its body out into the open. Before Gar could panic at the situation, he took another look at the creature and saw its state of being. Namu looked terrible. Its healing neck looked even worse than before as it bent so far off to the side it nearly looked like its head was doing a 180. Its body was so contorted, bruised, bleeding, and banged up that the only part of its body that looked normal was the arm that broke through the keel and one okay-looking leg. Other than that, the monster looked like it was being held up by spit and a prayer. Gar knew it was almost done. Now he just had to finish it off for good with his remaining Pokemon. And said Pokemon also knew this, especially Machamp, who dashed towards the exiting Namu and began to pummel it with close combat. After close combat ended, the humanoid Pokemon grabbed the Namu's head with two of its arms and used the remaining two to hit it with Mach Punch repeatedly. However, this also caused its bent neck to straighten out again. While this happened, Namu's limbs were starting to heal back up again, enough for it to hold its weight on its two legs. When the feeling returned to its limbs, the creature backhanded Machamp and sent it back, losing its grip in one swing. Machamp rolled across the ground but got back up after shaking itself off. Machamp then tried to engage the monster again. By now, its exhaustion and injury got the better of it, and the Pokemon fell to one knee with one painful eye closed as it breathed raggedly. Gar saw its injured Pokemon and commanded Dragapult to fly in between the Pokemon. The dragon obeyed and flew towards the ground while blocking off the Pokemon's path. Machamp looked at its trainer inquisitive as he stared back with a stern and serious expression. "You're not fighting any further, Machamp." The tone of his voice said there was no room for arguing. Machamp tried to show that it was alright by immediately standing up, but vertigo took over and the Pokemon fell back onto its knee. Gar shook his head and replied, "I'm not making you push yourself any further. You're taking a rest, and that's final. Now return," Gar stated while returning the Pokemon to its ball. Gar clipped the ball back to his belt and turned back to the monster at hand. He knew now he needed all hands on deck for this, so he called all his Pokemon towards him and hopped off Dragapult. Once all his Pokemon were at his sides, he looked back over to Namu and knew he had to use his special ace. He looked over to the large blue bird with a long tail, and an aura so cold it soothed the burn on his back. "Alright, Articuno, you're up," he said to the legendary bird of ice. Articuno screeched and flew toward the Namu, ready to take it on. Gar shot out his arm and exclaimed, "Now use Ice Beam." The bird Pokemon then shot a beam of ice from its mouth while encircling the monster. The ice slowly grew on its body, restraining it further and further. Eventually, the monster broke free from the ice and went on the attack, jumping from its spot right at the Pokemon. "Dodge," Gar commanded as the legend gracefully and Serenity moved out of the way while leaving a trail of glittering ice particles. The Namu landed and immediately tried to make another leap at the Pokemon. Gar told the bird to dodge, and Articuno kept moving out of the way each time. This eventually turned into a full game of cat and mouse with the Namu trying to lunge and take a swipe at the Pokemon, while Articuno looked on passively and bored as it outsays every attack like it was nothing. The Namu even tried to throw a rock at the Pokemon, but the bird only swept the boulder aside like a pebble. The boulder even froze solid once it touched the bird's wings and then shattered once it hit the ground. The Namu tried to take another leaping dive at the Pokemon but was stopped when Gar commanded, "Grab the Namu with your tail." Articuno obeyed and flew in a barrel roll style spin as its long tail wrapped around Namu's head, down to its body and legs. Once the Namu is securely wrapped up, the Pokemon begins to spin the beast around and around in the air. "Throw the monster sky high," Gar exclaimed. The bird threw the Namu straight up into the sky, where it ragdolled around helplessly. Articuno then caught up with the ascending Namu and spread its wings out like a shimmering god, ready for its next command, which Gar gave out just as quickly. "Use Hurricane." The Pokemon then flapped its wings hard, so hard that the wind generated felt like it was coming straight from a hurricane. The Namu plummeted from the sky and crashed straight to the earth with another miniature boom. The Pokemon flew down near the creator, and just before it could fly off in disinterest, Namu's hand flew out of the dust, grabbing the bird. And it did. The Nummo managed to surprise the Pokemon good enough to grab one of its wings, which was the wrong thing to grab. The Namu's arm quickly began to ice over and even travel up its shoulder, down its chest, and around its head. The Pokemon wrenched its wing free and ended up shattering the Namu's arm and most of its shoulder along with it. The Namu then tried to punch the bird with its other arm, but Articuno halted the punch with one of its feet, canceling the attack with ease. The bird then spun into the air, creating distance between them, and hovered near Gar. Tamura looked at the bird in shock at what it just did and exclaimed, "Impossible. I can sorta believe why your other pets survived an attack from my Namu, but how can that weak bird move and match strength on equal grounds?" Gar gave a snide smile as he replied triumphantly, "That is the power of a true legendary Pokemon. Articuno isn't just an ice type. It's the embodiment of that element." Tamura ground his teeth and shouted, "Namu, kill that bird by any means. Sacrifice your body if you must." The Namu did as it was told and blindly went after the Pokemon in a fury. It ran across the ground on all fours and leaped into the air again, reading a punch at the bird's smug-looking face. Gar fully anticipated this and quickly commanded, "Dragon Dart." Tamura recognized that command and tried to open his mouth to give another command. But it was far too late, even if he did manage to say something. The Namu was already mid-air and was then bombarded by two Dreepy being shot out at Mach speed. The Namu flew over to the side, and Gar gave another quick command. "Articuno, use Ice Beam." The legendary bird shot another beam of ice from its mouth and anchored the Namu to the spot it landed. "Now, Hurricane," Gar commanded as the bird flapped its wings hard enough to break the Namu free from the ground, with the ice still covering it, and sent it skyward. The Namu spun around wildly in a funnel. "Now, use Blizzard," Gar shouted as the bird screeched and released a stream of frigid air from its wings, turning the hurricane into an ice storm, causing the Namu to become a frozen block. When the blizzard and hurricane subsided, the frozen Namu fell to the earth again and shattered into 100 pieces, while also conveniently falling into the same hole it dropped in before. The teen and the bird waited for a moment to see if the Namu had actually broken out or just shattered into icy fragments. Both Pokemon inched closer with caution and tried to look into the hole. Nothing but unsettled dust and ice chunks were lying around. This made Gar and his two Pokemon relax at the thought of the monster finally being taken down. But the Namu showed another surprise, pulling yet another fast one and grabbing Dragapult by its tail. It then used it as a weapon against Articuno. The legendary bird tried to gain distance, but the Namu was forceful and persistent as it used the new range from Dragapult's 9 feet body and swung it at the bird's head, causing it to fall to the ground. Then, Namu stood on the bird's body with one foot and used Dragapult's body like a flail against the downed bird. Neither one can fight back. Gar knew where this was going, and knew his Pokemon were already defeated, so he took out their Pokeballs and returned them safely before Namu could harm them further. The moment the two Pokemon were converted to energy and out of sight, did the Namu switch its gears and make a mad dash for Gar. It managed to pass Tyranitar and outspeed Mimikyu before either of them could react properly. Gar gasped and froze up at the incoming monster and couldn't even bring himself to cover his face in defense as the creature rocketed towards him. Just before the monster could land a killing blow to the older teen, a Pokeball jumped from his belt and opened up in a blue beam of light. The light was bright enough to make the Namu flinch for a moment, which was enough for the Pokemon who burst out to counter the punch. When the light subsided, Machamp was standing between Gar and the Namu with one of its 4 arms holding back the Namu's punch with its own. "Machamp!" Gar exclaimed in surprise. Machamp looked over its shoulder and gave a reassuring smile with a thumbs up. It looked back at Namu with an angry expression, and just in time, as Namu was about to attack with its other arm. "Close combat," Gar shouted quickly. Machamp then punched the Namu in its face and went into a full-fledged assault that the Namu matched in both power and speed. Fists flew at speeds that the eye couldn't see, only the impact they made. Both monster and Pokemon received and exchanged blows, but not backing down an inch from each other. The fighting went on for only a few minutes, yet it felt like hours. Eventually, they both broke away from each other, and Gar took the opportunity to give a new command. "Mach Punch," Gar shouted while throwing a fist. Machamp charged a powerful punch with 2 hands, and Namu flung a punch with equal power to the weakened Pokemon. The two creatures hit each other with equal power in each of their faces. The blows on both sides were so powerful that it sent both of them flying back. The Namu flew back and rolled around like an out-of-control ball while coming to a sloppy stop on the ground. At the same time, Machamp dug its feet into the ground but still was sent skidding back from the blow. Gar was smashed into Machamp's body as it flew, even breaking his nose on its muscular back in the process. Machamp pulled through and stopped itself in place. It flexed its muscles and gave a war cry before falling back and fainting on the ground. Gar panicked for a moment and caught the Pokemon's head before it could fall all the way, and cradling the Pokemon, he sighed while pulling the Pokeball and saying, "You did awesome, Machamp. Thanks for the save. Take a good rest." The Pokemon went back into its ball while Tyranitar and Mimikyu went over to his sides in defense. Gar stood up on shaky legs with a bloody face as he stared down the Namu with his remaining 2 Pokemon, unsure if he could even pull this off. The Namu might be severely injured, but Gar knew it would take more than one pseudo-legendary and a ghost, fairy type to take this thing down for good. He was hoping for Articuno to finish it off, but now he was hanging on to strings. What else could he possibly do? He'd have to one-hit KO it. Tyranitar may be tough, but even some of his stronger Pokemon couldn't stand up to more than a few well-placed hits by Namu and Mimikyu. Wait a minute. Mimikyu. That's it. Gar came up with a quick plan while looking at his tiny toy Pokemon, and looking at Tyranitar, exclaimed, "Tyranitar, keep Namu busy." Tyranitar roared and then shot a hyper beam right at the Namu. Before the dust could settle, Tyranitar charged forward and slammed into Namu out of the dust cloud. As the 2 creatures fought, Gar put away his Dynamix band and put on a different band. It was black with a triangular tip and rounded end. It had many small engravings on it that also looked like triangles. He clamped the band around his wrist and took out a small, unusual crystal-colored pale yellow, shaped like a diamond with 2 smaller diamonds at each end, and an engraving that looked like Mimikyu's face, sort of. Gar looks at the tiny Pokemon and says, "Mimikyu, get ready to synchronize." Mimikyu looked behind him and saw what Gar was wearing and immediately felt the chills of excitement run up its whole body. Its eyes twinkled, and it readied itself with Gar in a synchronized posture and movement. Gar then reached the floor, and after giving off a deep breath, he exhaled in a loud war shout. "What's he doing now?" Kirigiri asked. "Finally lost his mind," Tamura theorized, just as confused. Gar then slowly rose with his arms and head ascending to the sky while still shouting his war cry. His screaming suddenly stopped as quickly as it came, and his 2 hands then formed a heart where he brought them to his eye level and said in the cutest voice and expression possible, "UWU. Did he just say?" Tamura stammered out with a weird expression. "I'd like to say no, but I can't," Kirigiri answered while also making a weird expression. Even the very atmosphere and appearance changed around Gar as he went full sappy baby voice and talked. It was enough to make someone feel nauseous. In addition, Mimikyu was copying the older teen in his gestures and mannerisms. "I love you so much. UWU. You're my sweetest, most wonderful, most waveable, snuggly cuppy supply cake ever," Gar said in the sappest, sugary sweet, baby voice anyone could manage while doing a bunch of cuties movements and poses. Tamura grabbed his mouth and stated, "I think I'm gonna be sick." Kirigiri said nothing, but he too looked like he was about to vomit, albeit keeping his composure much better. Even Tyranitar was starting to lose footing against the Namu from hearing the overly cute words assaulting his eyes holes and causing his stomach to twist. Gar then hugged himself with the sappiest squeal imaginable, like an excited child, and then said, "I just wanna hold you, and love you, and squeeze you, 24/7 my most cutest, sweetest, baby way ever." Tamura immediately held back vomit coming up his throat and just managed to squeak out before tossing his cookies, "Yep, I'm physically sick now. Gonna barf." He then bent over and emptied what was left in his stomach. Gar then spun around all childishly and, while forming another heart with his hands, stated in a much different tone, "UWU, I love you so much that I want to cuddle you to death." Wait, what was that? Tamura shot up his head with vomit at the sides of his mouth. At this point, Tamura finally realized that strange energy was flowing out of Gar and into Mimikyu, making the Pokemon glow a strange hue. Gar then pushed the heart out towards Mimikyu, who was also copying the gesture, and exclaimed in a normal voice, "Let's snuggle forever." Energy pooled out of Gar and followed directly into Mimikyu, who glowed with said energy like a light source surrounding it like a vortex. Mimikyu's eyes twinkled again, and the small Pokemon ran towards the monster at an alarming speed that was even faster than the last time. Tyranitar immediately knew what was coming and booked as quickly as he could muster. The Namu looked towards the light speed moving Mimikyu and readied to counter-attack it. But the small Pokemon jumped into the air far above the Namu and shot out its long thin arms around the Numo's head. The Pokemon then pulled the underside of its disguise down on the Numo head. Red eyes glowed under the darkness inside, staring right through the monster's soul as its rag body stretched out and covered the whole creature. It was dead quiet as the Namu was engrossed by the small Pokemon. But then, suddenly a noise emerged from under the stretch-out rag that went something like this. The sound of Namu's horrified screams emitted from inside Mimikyu's body as the Pokemon's body shook violently from Namu attempting to escape. But Mimikyu was determined not to let go. Black tentacles emerged from under the long rag and anchored it to the ground, keeping the Namu from breaking out. The screams of horror kept going on for several seconds while the Pokemon shook back and forth. Then the screaming stopped. It was a dead quiet from all around the field. Everyone stared at the giant-sized Pokemon. Then Mimikyu unanchored itself from the ground and slowly cascaded its way off its prisoner. When the rag shrunk back down to normal size, the Namu was revealed, but in much different looking light. Instead of a large, black, muscular creature looming over all, now laid a small, bony, pale white husk of a creature, laying on the ground in a fetal position, clutching its skinny body in a hug, shaking like a leaf, with its eyes rolled back in its head with tears streaming out of them. The Numa was almost nothing. But Gar knew, even if this thing would die eventually or live to be permanently scarred by what it saw, it would still be able to heal and fight. Now that it was in the most vulnerable state it's been thus far, he knew he had to finish it off here and now. So without looking away from the monster, he gave one last command to Mimikyu, saying, "Use Shadow Claw." Mimikyu obeyed, and in one swift motion, it swung its small, fast arm across the Namu and decapitated it in one slice. The head flew from the body and managed to hobble and bounce over to the feet of the very shocked Tamura. The young man picked up in both hands, giving a silent expression of utter shock as he looked between the head and the older teen to make sure this was real. When he finally realized it was real, he gripped the head with all his fingers and caused it to decay into ash. He looked at the teen with hate in his eyes and began to throw a tantrum, stamping his feet against the floor, going red in the face, and foaming at the mouth while making incomprehensible noises. No, 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 no. Why? This can't happen. This shouldn't happen. My Namu was a hero killer, the anti-All Might. This was supposed to work. This was supposed to be my day. I wanted to kill All Might. He screamed like a child. His eyes then shot towards the older teen, and pointing an accusing finger, he shouted, You cheater. Hacks. I call them hacks. Gar spit the blood dripping from his nose and said with a serious expression and tone of voice, I don't cheat. I have skills, something you lack. If you had even an ounce of observation skills, you'd know Mimikyu hides its body under a rag for a reason. One look under there, and an early grave is imminent. Tamura ground his teeth and tightened his hands into fists so hard that they began to bleed. It doesn't matter. Even if I can't kill All Might, I'm gonna kill you once and for all. He screamed at him. Tyranitar came to Gar's side while growling and replied, Then do it, coward. Tamura motioned to run and to attack, but Gar quickly reacted, exclaiming, Tyranitar, use Hyper Beam. The large dinosaur lizard Pokemon shot the pale energy beam from its mouth right at the oncoming villain. Tamura didn't even have time to move out of the way as his body was moved so far forward he couldn't turn. Just before the attack hit, Kirigiri made a portal and redirected the attack behind them. The Mistman made a large wall of himself between the angry Pokemon and the floored hand villain while offering to make a retreat. Gar ground his teeth in frustration. If neither normal, ghost, or even fairy-type moves could affect this guy, then what could? He just couldn't let them escape. But he was in no position to do so. Before the two villains could make their escape, two very loud and precise bang noises reverberated off the glass dome as Tamura fell to the floor with 2 gunshot wounds in his legs. The two villains looked off to the side where the upper level was on the cliffside and saw several pro heroes from UA standing atop the cliffside, looking down at the scene below. So sorry we're late to the party. We would have come sooner if our invitation was sent on time. But it looks like we've arrived just in time for the climax. All Might bellowed while ripping off his overcoat and tie. Tamura hissed. Thank Arceus, Gar exclaimed in relief. Snipe tried to take another shot at the villains, but Kirigiri quickly spread himself across Tamura in a defensive fort, causing the bullets to pass through the other end. Perhaps we should make a hasty retreat, young sir, Kirigiri offered. Tamura growled but did not object. As Kirigiri expanded before disappearing, Gar changed his stance and exclaimed, I won't let you get away. Tyranitar, Mimikyu, used Dark Pulse. The Pokemon obeyed and shot out encircling beams of darkness from their mouths at the mist wall. However, the attacks never passed through the portal and instead hit like any physical attack. Kirigiri groaned in pain as his body dissipated and fluctuated. Gar saw this and knew he had them. so he exclaimed another command, keep using Dark Pulse. The two Pokemon did as they were told and kept bombarding the mist wall with constant beams of dark energy. Kurogiri kept groaning in pain until it turned into full-fledged screams of agony, which kept him from keeping his protective barrier up and disappearing with Tamura in tow. A large hole occasionally appeared in the wall, and Gar was highly tempted to try and use another attack through the hole, but the gaps would disappear every time. Though he did notice that with every attack he took, he wouldn't be able to hold up his wall for a longer period, meaning Gar only needed to wait. Though this time around, Gar had help from the other heroes, as each of them with ranged quirks tried to attack Tamura from within the wall, but Kurogiri kept blocking and redirecting each attack. This went on long enough for All Might to change up a good punch and then shouted, "Detroit Smash." He bellowed as a huge air current was created from his blow and caused the Mist Man to dissipate, leaving Tamura completely vulnerable. The heroes tried to close in on him quickly, but Gar was giving commands even quicker as he shouted to Tyranitar, "Hyper Beam." Tyranitar shot out the energy beam again, and it made a straight line for the shocked and frozen villain still sitting helplessly on the ground. Even if he did look beat, Gar knew what kind of power he was packing, and he wasn't going to allow him to harm another person. He was going to keep his word and take him to the big house in a stretcher. Just as the beam was mere inches from collision, Kurogiri manifested in a small swirl around Tamura and pulled him away from the attack. The hyper beam missed its target and hit the cliffside wall, causing it to explode. The two villains were gone within a moment, nowhere to be seen. Only a bit of lingering black mist. Gar was instantly shocked by their sudden disappearing act until it turned to anger and frustration. Kicking a rock and violently rubbing his broken nose hard enough for it to bleed even harder from the pressure, he ground his teeth and cursed under his breath while pulling at his ruined hoodie. "Arceus, damn it. Arceus, damn it. I almost had him. He was right there, and then he just disappeared into thin air. I wanted to stop that freak here and now. I barely managed to put down his monster, and I couldn't even finish the job with him. Now he'll just come back like all of them. Damn it, damn it." Gar screamed in frustration until he finally wore himself out. While the heroes assessed the situation, Snipe went over to comfort the angry crying teen looking at the ground with hunched shoulders and a look of defeat on his face. The cowboy hero stood to his side. Unsure of how to break the ice, he said, "You know, not every hero catches the villain. Sometimes no matter how hard we try to take him down and put him away, sometimes they just get away. That's just part of life, you know." Snipe didn't think his message was resonating since Gar stood in the same spot, not crying, but unmoving. He sighed and continued saying, "You know, all things considered, you did an amazing job today. No experience with fighting villains from our world, and you handled it far better than expected. No casualties, mild property, and collateral damage subdued several of his lackeys and found a weakness in his portal guy. On top of that, you managed to kill whatever that thing is. Not sure what it is, but I can tell it puts up one hell of a fight for ya." Still, Gar didn't move or speak, just stood there. Snipe rubbed the back of his dreads and tried to finish off strong, saying, "Look, what I'm trying to say is you did real good today, partner. Better than good. So don't beat yourself up on not catching the horns after defeating his monster. We'll get him next time he pokes his mug out of the brush, and we'll catch him. That I can promise." Snipe went to give a reassuring pat on the teen's shoulder, but before his hand could even touch his body, Gar suddenly gave a light gasp and fell over. Before he fell completely, Tyranitar's, surprisingly, managed to catch him in his arms quickly. Snipe nearly froze up in shock before he quickly snapped himself back and called out to the other heroes. A few heroes came over but were pushed aside by Midnight, who took off her glasses and pressed 2 fingers to the older teen's neck. She sighed in relief and said, "It's okay, you guys, he's just passed out. But my god, I can't believe he is still standing." Guess the adrenaline rush finally subsided. But damn, those injuries look nasty. That burn on his back is so huge, and his chest. Dear God, how long has he been bleeding from there? She looked at Snipe and stated, "He needs medical attention, stat." Snipe nodded and began to run out of the USJ to get the paramedic. Midnight looked up to Tyranitar and opened her mouth to give the Pokemon a command, but her face quickly deflated once she realized she didn't know how to address the Pokemon. Instead, she opted to say, "Okay, you, dragon dinosaur thing. Gar-kun needs medical treatment right now. Follow Snipe, the guy in the cowboy getup, outside the USJ with Gar." Tyranitar seemed to understand and followed the cowboy hero as its heavy footsteps thundered across the hard ground like a mini earthquake. At the same time, little Mimikyu looked on in worry, with its false head slumping down, as it followed after Tyranitar holding Gar while trying to reach out to hold his limp hand. But something stopped Mimikyu's following. The little Pokemon turned to whatever it sensed and saw some of the purple mist residues float up and take the form of a small purple portal no bigger than a dinner plate, with one long yellow eye peering out at the scene. Mimikyu scuttled over to the eye, and when the eye noticed the Pokemon, it stared directly at it. Mimikyu tilted its false head back and forth a bit before saying to the mist, my curse you." Mimikyu's eyes glittered with malicious intent as it mumbled out these words. The mist immediately vanished after hearing this, and once gone, Mimikyu went back to follow his trainer to paramedics. Gar slept peacefully and silently. The only sound coming off him was his soft breathing, the only movement from his chest. He looked so calm as he slept, but then he started to stir. A tired groan escaped his lips, and his closed eyes began to flutter open. After some movement under his sheets of trying to stretch, he finally relaxed with a content sigh. As Gar's mind and memory started to tune back into previous events, his eyes immediately shot open with panic. He ripped at the covers in a panic as he flopped like a beached Magikarp to sit up. He finally pulled the covers away from his body, and sat up with eyes wide, breath heavy, and body tense. After a few minutes of heavy and panicked breathing, he finally looked around the area he was in and noticed he was in some sort of hospital room. The room has white walls, ceiling, curtains, bedding with blue tile floor, stainless steel tools, trays, and other assortments of items, along with the light scent of chemicals and medicine in the air. The window in his room showed bright light coming through, and the wall clock read 10:30 a.m. Monitors that lightly beeped in rhythm to keep track of his vitals. Gar saw the implants and IV tubes on his body and ripped them off. Once he ripped them off, he immediately felt a searing pain in his left breast and tenderly grabbed his body in pain. He didn't even want to know why that part of him hurt, so he left it alone. After the implants were off, the machines flatlined from no reading. Gar tried to calm himself down as he put his hands in his face, rubbing his hair, and trying to shake off the excess panic and fatigue in his body. Gar started to cry. He didn't know why he did, but as Gar was sitting there and with his face covered in his hands, he started an ugly cry for no reason. He even gave a laugh or two, which scared him a few times between sobs. He sat there and cried his eyes out for a good 10 minutes until he finally got control of himself and calmly breathed. The moment he stopped crying and was fully calm, someone opened the door and walked into his room. Gar looked over and almost had to do a double take when he saw no one standing there. But then his eyes cast down, and he saw a very short old woman dressed like a nurse with a cane that's shaped like a syringe. "Well, I'm glad to see you awake," the woman said sweetly. Gar knew this person and asked, "Recovery girl?" "That's me," the short woman answered as she creakily walked over to him. She hobbled over and saw the flatlined machines and the forcefully removed implants and IV cord, some of which had been broken from being removed so roughly. Recovery girl sighed in mild irritation as she said, "You really shouldn't have removed those from your body, especially with such force. They may be small, but they're not cheap." Gar rubbed the back of his head as he apologized. "Sorry about that. I wasn't thinking. They were just on me when I woke up, and I pulled them off before I realized what they were or where I was." The old lady sighed again and replied, "It's all right, it's understandable. This happens at times, so I'm used to patients doing it by accident. Now let's get the rest of your equipment off of you properly before you bleed out." Gar was confused by this statement until he looked down at his arm and saw that the IV syringe was bleeding him out in small drops. "Oh," was the only thing he said. As Recovery Girl worked to remove all the other wires, devices, and doodads from Gar's body, the teen, who still wasn't in the right state of mind, mindlessly asked, "Where am I?" "You're in the UA infirmary, of course," the old woman answered without missing a step. Gar gave a dry laugh and followed up, "Yeah, I guessed it was obvious." As Recovery Girl was finishing up, Gar asked another question, "What happened?" Recovery Girls gave an understanding hum and asked back, "Before I do you remember anything?" Gar paused for a moment before answering, "Well, we arrived at the USJ, and villains attacked us. Shota and I fought a flood of them. 13 got hurt, everyone was scattered. I sent my Pokemon to help everyone. A giant beak thing attacked Shota. I and my Pokemon managed to hold it off. All my Pokemon got defeated. I somehow managed to break the time-space continuum with Rotom and my Pokebox. I sent out a bunch of Pokemon to fight the monster, and they all lost, and then I'm not sure. Everything just becomes fuzzy after that." Before Recover Girl could explain what happened, panic shot through Gar as he exclaimed to the woman, "The monster. Those villains called it Namu. It was supposed to kill All Might. What happened to it? Tell me." "Easy, honey, easy," Recovery Girl said to him in a calm tone. Gar stopped panicking, but the stress and tenseness on his face didn't leave. "I saw the video of you fighting that Namu thing. Your Pokemon got taken down one by one until you were only left with two. The small one you called Mimikyu managed to get the job done. After the two of you did a strange dance and your animal covered that thing in its sheet. It came out looking like it saw hell, and then your Pokemon sliced its head off, she explained, and upon hearing this, Gar relaxed. Something else crossed the older teen's mind, and he became even more panicked as he exclaimed, Katsukui, Ijiro, Shoto, Izuku. Oh Arceus, that thing creamed them. Gar then grabbed the old woman in a panic and started to shake her and demanded in a fearful panic, Please, Chio, please tell me they're all right. Everyone, my Pokemon, and Rotom. Please, please, please. Chio had been in situations like this and knew exactly how to handle them. She held the panicking teen's hands gently yet firmly to stop him from shaking her, and in a calm tone, she said, Easy now, easy. Take deep breaths with me. The old woman then began to match Gar's panicked breathing until she could sync his with hers and control it to a more calm state. After several minutes of taking calming breaths and gentle hand rubs from the older woman, Gar is viable and relaxed enough to speak and reason again. The older teen rubbed tears from his eyes as he said, I'm sorry about that. Chio gave a kind chuckle and replied, It's all right, dear, I understand. You're panicked after this whole experience, and I've dealt with panic attacks more than once. Some are far worse than what you did. Gar gave a nervous chuckle. But to explain your dilemma, your other classmates were far worse for wear when they came in. But they all managed to make a full recovery. She winked at the last part, making Gar smile. Many of your Pokemon were also in bad shape. I'm no vet, so I couldn't do much, so UA had to contract professional veterinarians to aid them. After some paperwork and a small sum of cash from UA to keep the Pokemon quiet, they're all recovering and should be in the fighting force in a few days to a week. So you bribed a small army of Nurse Joys to heal my Pokemon? Gar asked sarcastically. In essence, yes, the old woman answered. As for your living phone friend, no one really could work on it, since it wasn't a living creature or technology. So we gave him time to rest in a charger. Gar sighed and relaxed all the way, hearing this news as he said, That sure takes a load off my chest. Then Gar remembered something else and asked, What about the villains? Recovery Girl checked on the state of the other implants that Gar ripped off and explained. All of their lackeys that they sent to fight you kids were caught and arrested. As for the leaders, they unfortunately escaped. Gar ground his teeth and pounded his fist against the arm of the bed. Arceus damn it. Though he immediately regretted this as pain shot up his arm, and he hissed from the shock. Don't hurt yourself any further, please, Recovery Girl said firmly while not taking her eyes off what she was doing. Gar only grunted in pain while grabbing his arm and sitting back against his pillow. Gar then remembered something else and rubbing his head, he asked in a groan, How long was I out? It's Friday, she replied without missing a beat. Gar shot straight up, eyes wide and body tense from this news, as he exclaimed, I was unconscious for 3 days. I'd say you slept pretty well in all regards. Shota would kill to be you. The old lady snickered to herself. Chio, this is serious. I wasn't sleeping. I was in a coma. He stressed to her. A temporary coma I had to induce on you. She expanded. Gar stopped for a moment and asked, You what? Why? While you were recovering and being treated for your injuries, you were in a semi-conscious lucid state of awareness. You kept fighting back during treatment and travel while muttering about how you had to get back, stop the monster, save everyone and so forth. So it was I either restrain you or put you into a state of temporary rest until you recovered enough. Have to say, though, you have quite the fighting spirit, Chio explained. Gar sighed as he said, Sorry about the trouble. She waved it off and replied, It's all right, but you did make a good recovery. Now I'll just give you a once-over, write out a new prognosis for you, and you can be on your way. Gar nodded, and the old lady pulled out a stand to get eye level with the older teen. Once she was at his height, she began to poke and prod around his face and nose. Chio, Gar said with the old woman pinching his nose, to which she replied with a hum. I know you're a medical professional, but normally only Ambipom picks my nose when I'm not looking. He remarked sarcastically. Recovery Girl gave an irritated sigh, not amused by the joke, and explained, I'm not picking your nose, I'm checking it. It was extremely damaged when you were brought in, and I wanted to make sure you don't have any facial fractures. Now do you feel anything? She asked while pinching it and pulling it in different spots. Just your cold old ladyfinger, Gar answered, until the old woman's cane fell hard on his head. Oh, I could have been way more descriptive, Gar complained. The old woman gave a gruff growl as she stated, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't. Now, if you wouldn't mind disrobing from your upper body, I'll finish up. Gar looked down at his hospital gown that he didn't realize he was wearing and said, Oh, okay. Gar then tried to remove his gown down to his waistline, albeit extremely slowly due to his sore body. Once he slipped the sleeves off and revealed his bare upper body, he immediately freaked out upon seeing his chest. "Holy Bisharp, what happened to my chest?" he yelled while looking down at the large, misshapen, healing scars that covered his entire left breast. "That villain you fought, the one with the hands. He had a quirk that decayed your left breast and showed his elbow. You're both very lucky to still have those parts of your body. Thanks to your clothing, only the first few layers of skin managed to rot off. Another minute or so, and your muscle would have been exposed. You may have even lost that part completely," Recovery Girl explained calmly while setting a clipboard on his bed and donning a pair of gloves. "But I did what I could, and you are still able to use or keep those parts of your body, though you both will have a scar." Gar looked at his new battle wound, not at all enjoying the sight of it, until he noticed something strange and asked, "Wait, do I still have a nipple?" Gar then tenderly felt around his breath and only felt slight twinges of pain from how tender it was. His eyes went wide as he screamed, "Sweet barbaracle, I don't have a nipple." "Calm down, sweetie," Recovery Girl said calmly. "I don't have a fucking nipple." Gar screamed, "Dearie, I'm the one nipple freak. Garfield. Oh, Arceus, when Katsuki finds out, he'll never let me live it down." Gar continued to complain in a panic until Recovery Girl's cane found its way on his head. "Oh," Gar complained, making himself stop his ranting. "Are you done?" she asked, calm yet exhausted. "Yes," Gar drowned out. The old woman took a calming breath and explained, "Now then, I can't fix Shota's cause of its location, but yours is much more doable. I can cultivate a few skin grafts and use some plastic surgery to give you a fake nipple. It won't be the same, but it'll look much better." Gar looked down at his injury for a few moments until he finally answered with a soft, "No, I don't think I'll do that." Recovery Girl looked at him strangely until he corrected himself, exclaiming, "I mean yet, I won't do it yet. I want to keep it for now, as a reminder, an incentive for myself, to find and put away all those bastards and their cohorts for what they did to us," he stated while tightening his hand into a fist. Recovery Girl shrugged and stated, "If that's what you want, I won't force you to do what you don't desire, but I will keep the offer open. Just don't wait too long, I'm old. Now would you mind bending over?" Gar looked at her strangely, then said, "I think I'm too young for a prostate exam." Another whack of the elderly nurse's cane went on his head. "Oh, stop that. I'm injured. Keep up that smart tongue, and I'll put you into another coma," she stated firmly. "Crazy old gallbat," Gar thought in his head as he gingerly bent forward. A couple of minutes went by as Recovery Girl poked and prodded his back, and Gar was getting kind of sore in the stomach. After one last hum from the lady, she finally said, "Well, I'm very surprised. That large burn on your back has nearly made a full recovery. Do you remember how you got it?" Gar sighed in aggravation, not wanting to remember the event, but still told her, "Unfortunately, I do. I and Volcarona tried to intimidate the Namu after it started to pummel Shota. Then it tried to pile drive us from a few hundred feet in the air. Volcarona tried to set it on fire to let us go, but it didn't do anything. I remember Heatwave nearly turning that thing into a burnt Torchic nugget before, but this time, it was almost like it was gaining immunity to fire damage. Its arms went up in flames and burnt straight through my jacket and bodysuit. Then Volcarona alleviated the pain with its black wing scales. Well, it's a good thing you were wearing those, otherwise, you probably would have been burnt even worse. And that does explain the weird black markings I found on your back," Recovery Girl stated while writing something down on the clipboard next to her. After she was done jotting down her notes, she turned to him and said, "All right, everything looks in order. A little aloe vera twice a day on the back for the next week, and it should be fine. Now let's have a look at the front." Gar complied and sat back up while the older woman poked and prodded his chest like his other body parts. After a minute had passed off her poking his injury and him trying to hold back his grunts, she finally asked, "Does it hurt when I do this?" Gar breathed out a painful gasp as he practically yelped, "Arg. Yes, please stop touching it." The older woman immediately pulled her hand away and apologized, "Sorry." Gar held his breast as he breathed to alleviate the pain. The older woman pulled off her gloves and started to write some more notes down her clipboard while Gar placed the hospital gown over his body again. After some more silence between them, with the only sound being Gar's pain-filled grunts and Chio's scribbling, the old woman finally said, "Well, after another round or two of healing and some painkillers that you'll take to the end of next week, and you should be fine to go." Gar sighed as he said, "Thanks, Chio." The old woman smiled at him and went back to sorting out something nearby as Gar sat in his bed looking out the window. After some more silence filled the room between them, Gar piped up out of nowhere and grabbed Chio's attention. You know, it's kinda embarrassing seeing myself like this. I've crossed some of the most intense and dangerous environments alive. I've fought and disbanded dangerous evil organizations. Caught Pokemon so powerful that they could restructure or destroy the world. I've taken hyper beams, mock punches, rock throws, flame bursts, fury swipes, bites, double kicks, thunderbolts, poison fangs, hydro pumps, ice beams, and several other moves from Pokemon, and have always managed to shake it off or walk it off or need days rest to recover, he said with self-disappointment. Recovery Girl gave an understanding hum and replied, well, none of us are invincible demigods. There is a limit to what everyone can do. Gar sighed in understanding. Sometimes I wish I was. It'd be so much easier. I could fix so many more problems with ease, he said while hugging his knees to his chest. The old woman looked to the disappointed teen with sympathy, and continued, I understand what you're saying. Gar glanced over to her voice. You want to help but can't due to being just human. But that's just the thing, we are still human. We're soft and vulnerable and still have to remember that. It's okay to strive for better in ourselves and the things we do. But just remember not to hurt yourself in the process, she told him. Gar gave another self-disappointed yet understanding sigh and replied, yeah, it's just everything here is so much different. The rules, the laws, all of it. None of what's happened so far would ever happen in my world, or at least not with this level of intensity. It scares me. Gar sunk in on himself while staring blankly at the wall. Chia wanted to help brighten the teen's spirits, knowing that a happy person meant a quicker recovery, and also she didn't like seeing children in this state, so she quickly said with a bit of joy in her throat, oh, before I forget. Gar snapped out of his staring trance and looked at the lady. You have some visitors waiting for you outside, she said while walking towards the door. Gar gave her a curious look as he asked, visitors? Who? Just as the nurse opened the door, a pair of hands forcefully flung it open, and a huge flood of people rushed into his room, nearly trampling the old lady, shouting his name. Gar, he screamed while holding his hand out in defense. Sorry we scared you like that. Izuku suddenly appeared in front of him, apologizing in a bow with clasped hands in front. Geez, you almost gave me a heart attack, Gar shouted while clutching his chest, not even registering the pain. Forgive us, Gar-san. We were just really worried about you. When Recovery Girl said we couldn't come in until after she was done with your follow-up, we couldn't hold ourselves back. Ida apologized profusely while doing his robotic arm movements. Gar sighed with relief while calming down and said, I appreciate the sentiment, but please try to be a little calmer the next time this happens. Well, I certainly hope something like this doesn't happen again, Recovery Girl stated while picking her clipboard up from the floor. I almost forgot, we have a special visitor who's been dying to see you again. Uraraka poked in with a happy tone. Gar gave her a puzzled look until something shot from her arms and cried, Mimikyu. Mimikyu lunged out from her grasp and dashed over to Gar at full speed with happy sparkles in its eyes. The Pokemon slapped right into Girl's chest, and unfortunately, it was the left one. Gar let out a yelp of pain while trying to hold it in and ended up making a puffed check expression while tears rolled down his red face. Mimikyu noticed Gar's state of pain and immediately backed up. Gar breathed out, and in a studied hoarse tone, he said, It's okay. You didn't know. I appreciate it though. After Gar gasped for air and waited for his chest pain to subside enough to speak, he asked, Anyway, is everyone alright? We're just fine, thanks to you. Only minor injuries, Nina answered. What about Izuku, Ijiro, Shoto and Katsuki? Gar asked with a slight panic in his voice. Kirishima pushed forward and gave a sharp smile and thumbs up. He exclaimed, We're awesome, man. Sure, that Nanu thing whipped us good, but Recovery Girl's quirk works miracles. My quirk only accelerates your natural healing. I'm not some pseudo-messiah, the old woman firmly told them in the background. Gar then looked around at his classmates and saw that each of them was in normal civilian attire, which he knew was weird, so he asked, Wait, why aren't you guys in uniform? Also, shouldn't you guys be in class right now? Momo shook her head and answered, School's been cancelled for the rest of the week, so we decided to come and visit you every day till you woke up. And I told you, children, that he was induced in a temporary coma. And I told you when I was going to wake him up. The old woman exclaimed from the background in a much more annoyed tone. We just wanted to be sure. We're sorry for the trouble. Ida bowed in apology. Suddenly a new voice jumped in and exclaimed, Bust. Hey. What about me? You're forgetting your most important visitor. Buzzed, Rotom, Gar exclaimed happily as the phone nuzzled by his face. Boy, am I glad you're all right. You look good. How are you feeling? He asked the Pokemon. Buzzed, I feel a whole lot better, Garfield. Buzzed, a few days in a charger and I feel fighting fit. The phone replied while doing a mid-air spin. Gar sighed and stated, "That's a relief." As Gar looked back at the group of teens surrounding his bed, he immediately noticed a very heavy feeling in the air. So he addressed it, asking, "By the way, are you guys okay? I know you're all happy to see me awake and all, well, most of you, but you all seem tense about something." No one said a word, which worried the older teen until Izuku piped up and answered his question. "Don't freak out, but something did happen while you were Mia," he explained while rubbing the back of his head nervously. Trying to lighten the mood a bit, Gar asked sarcastically, "Oh no, did Gyarados try to eat Katsuki again?" "I'm right here, dumbass," the ash-blonde teen shouted in the back corner. "Is Katsuki a ghost? Maybe I can finally catch him," Gar stated with a silly smile. "Eat shit and die, purple fucker." He whipped his head towards him while holding up his middle finger. No, none of that. You see, well, Uraraka began to purposely drone on. Gar just gave her a look and demanded, "Well, what? Come on, don't leave me in suspense." A video surfaced on the internet not too long after the attack. Momo continued. "And?" he asked. "It was of you fighting the Namu with your Pokemon." Izuku finished. Gar's eyes went wide as he practically shouted, "What?" "Yeah, it's the whole fight. From start to finish." Mina jumped in. "How did a video of my fight get on the internet? And who uploaded it?" Gar asked, completely baffled. "That's what we're trying to figure out." Buzzed. "Here, have a look," Rotom said while turning his screen to Gar and pulling up a video. The video popped up, and it was a two-part aerial and ground view of the fight with Namu. Gar's eyes went wide as he looked at the video, completely engrossed in it. It was like reliving the whole experience from a third-person view. The video was only 5 minutes long, but he was so engrossed in watching it and grossly unaware of anything outside that it felt like a second. He saw his Pokemon fall in mere moments as the Namu absorbed their attacks, healed them, and whipped them around like nothing. When the video ended, Gar swallowed dryly and, in a dream tone, stated, "That's me. We think that the villains were the ones who uploaded it." Buzzed. Rotom told him, "Why would they even want to upload a video of me fighting and killing their anti-All Might monster?" Gar asked, completely confused while holding his head, trying to comprehend it. "That's the thing, we don't think they were recording you specifically," Ida put forth. "Yeah, not everything is about you, bitch." Bakugou spat, but was quickly silenced by the long sharp arm of Mimikyu, who struck the wall next to him and hissed, "Bakugou, this is not the time," Uraraka stated firmly. She sighed and followed up, saying, "As we were saying, we think they were trying to get a video of the Namu fighting and killing All Might." Gar thought it over for a minute, and then the thought dawned on him, and he looked down at his bedsheets with a dreaded expression while saying softly, "If they had succeeded." But then was cut off by Rotom and his warning noises, then there would be instant panic. Buzzed, not just across the hero department but also across the civilians of Japan and the world. Buzzed, it would shake the delicate balance of society. They were gonna send a message with All Might's corpse as its heraldry. Buzzed, the Pokemon freaked out while getting louder. Everyone in the room was covering their ears as Gar tried to calm his phone down. "Easy Rotom, calm down. Panic won't help anybody." Rotom held himself back, stopped his warning noises, and calmed down bit by bit. So instead of causing widespread panic with the death of the #1 hero, they switched gears and used the interdimensional guy with multi-quirked magic animals to do that. Kaminari put it together. Gar sweats nervously at this thought. Sure, the immediate people in his class and the UA staff understood that Pokemon aren't necessarily dangerous since they knew Gar and them. But the entire world learning about them with no context was something else. Gar knew this sort of situation before, and it never started or ended well for any party involved. Gar gave a shaky breath as he asked, "Has the video been traced back to the sender?" Buzzed, "It has, but the only thing the heroes uncovered was an auto-generated email account that's now deactivated." Buzzed, "And a dusty old laptop in an abandoned warehouse with some unscannable fingerprints," Rotom explained, as Gar growled under his breath and made fists. "Well, that sucks. What about the video? Has it been taken down?" Gar asked. "It was, but," Izuku drawled out. Gar sighed in exasperation and pinching the bridge of his nose, he stated, "Let me guess, it was deleted but found, saved, shared, and reuploaded by several people across the internet. It blew up simultaneously and has even caught the ever-vigilant and brown-nosing media, reporting on it to high heaven. It's gotten so bad that even the government is starting to question UA on info." After a long pause by the students of being unable to speak, Gar asked, "How'd I do?" "How'd you know?" Izuku asked, a little freaked out by his publication. "Physic powers," Gar joked while wiggling his fingers, making only a few people chuckle or giggle. Gar sat back on his bed while looking up to the ceiling and mindlessly petting Mimikyu as tons of thoughts strolled through his head. Gar rubbed his face with one hand and looked down at the small Pokemon, and phone Pokemon sitting comfortably on his stomach and floating near his face, and said with an exhausted and nervous-sounding tone, "Well, guess there's no reason to hide you guys anymore, cause now the big secret is out. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 4. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye."